Chapter 1: Shadows of Pembroke Manor. I pushed a worn feather duster along the scuffed wooden banisters in the dim corridor, my fingers lingering for just a moment on the heavy, locked library door. The chill of its iron handle seeped into my skin, a reminder of all that lay beyond, books and dreams I would never possess, locked away like my aspirations within these walls. Dust motes danced lazily in the weak light filtering through the grimy windows, suspended in a purgatory of neglect that mirrored my own existence at Pembroke Manor. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, polished boots clicking in precise rhythm against the creaking floorboards, a sound that sent a shiver racing down my spine. Arthur Pembroke strode into view, a figure wrapped in authority, his tall frame commanding even the shadows that dared to flicker in his wake. The polished brass buttons of his dark suit gleamed as he approached, casting his cold gray eyes on me with an appraisal that stripped away the remaining shreds of my dignity. "Cease your lingering here," he commanded, his voice a clipped tone that brooked no argument. The air turned stale in his presence, a heaviness that threatened to stifle my resolve. He snatched the duster from my grasp as if it were a mere plaything, a gesture of ownership that left my fingers tingling with the abrupt loss. I withdrew my hand slowly, leaving a trail of disturbed dust in my wake as I backed away under his piercing gaze. It seemed to mock my efforts, my hopes, and I felt an ugly resentment swell in the pit of my stomach, bitter and all-consuming. With each harsh syllable that fell from his lips, a sense of rebellion stirred within me, but I choked it back, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of defiance. As he gestured sharply toward the door, I felt the walls of Pembroke Manor close in around me, the atmosphere thickening like the onset of a storm. My breath quickened, trapped between duty and the smoldering urge to escape the shackles of my servitude. "Do you hear me, girl?" His frown deepened, and I nodded, a reflex born of years spent learning the unspoken language of fear. The heavy sounds of his measured steps receded into the long, silent hall, leaving me suspended in a void of my own making. The stillness that followed was almost deafening. I strained to hear the rustle of my heart amidst the quiet. With him gone, the oppressive atmosphere dissipated ever so slightly, yet I remained acutely aware of the weight pressing down upon my chest, as if the manor itself conspired against my spirit. I glanced back at the library door, feeling its allure tugging at my consciousness, an unquenchable thirst for knowledge whispering in the silence. To be among the tomes, to touch their spines and inhale their ancient wisdom, I longed for it all. Yet it was a fantasy as forbidden as it was intoxicating, reserved for those of Arthur Pembroke's ilk, and out of reach for a maid like me. Turning on my heel, I resumed my task, but I could not shake the feeling of being watched, the sensation prickling my skin. I couldn't help but think of the myriad stories woven into the fabric of this place, tales of triumph and despair, echoing against the walls I called home. The very air seemed thick with unspoken histories and dark secrets, each creak and sigh a reminder that my own story, for all its potential, was marked by a heavy darkness. I noticed Lady Beatrice Pembroke emerging from the shadowed recess of a nearby archway, her silhouette framed by the dim light falling from a wrought iron lamp, every inch of her poised perfection echoing an invitation I dared not accept. The ethereal quality of her presence turned the air heavy with anticipation as I caught sight of her pale hands, folded delicately as if she were a statue carved from ice, waiting to melt only at her convenience. "Ella," she said, her voice a cultivated whisper, as though my name were a sweet delicacy meant to linger on her tongue. I felt the flutter of unease flutter in my stomach, recognizing the false warmth of her tone. Beneath the surface lay a coldness that could bite through the finest silk. As she leaned gracefully against the doorframe, her sharp, angular features caught the flickering light, casting shadows that danced wickedly across the floor. The quiet clack of her stilettos echoed softly against the boards, a haunting melody that accompanied the rustle of her satin dress, drawing my gaze against my will. "Have you completed your tasks for the day?" The question hung in the air like a soft blade, punctuated by her thin, measured smile. I met her gaze, an appraisal that felt more like an interrogation. The warmth of her voice was mere artifice, and I stood before her, acutely aware of the power she wielded. "I have done as instructed, my lady." My voice wavered, betraying the anxiety that crawled beneath my skin. I could sense her scrutiny as it pierced through the carefully constructed barriers of propriety. "Good," she replied, her smile deepening with a hint of predatory satisfaction. "I do hope you are being mindful of your manners, even in your service. It would be a shame to sully our family name with carelessness." The veiled insult twisted in the pit of my stomach, like a poison that threatened to spill over. "Of course, my lady." I forced myself to hold her gaze, the weight of my submission pressing heavily on my shoulders. In that moment, I was acutely aware of every breath I took, the pounding of my heart an insistent reminder of my place. Lady Beatrice continued to regard me, her cold blue eyes dissecting my every move with the precision of a surgeon's knife. It felt as if the air crackled with unspoken tension, and the walls around us seemed to draw closer, reminding me of the confinement of my station. "I trust you've been reading?" Her tone shifted, sweetening like honey over broken glass as she ventured closer. "I've seen you with those," her voice dipped into a conspiratorial hush, "inexplicably fascinating books. Knowledge is a luxury, after all, reserved for those of a certain station." I swallowed hard, the bitterness of her words gnawing at my resolve. "I do what I can, my lady. Books, however few, can provide a sanctuary." Her laughter bubbled forth, a sound crafted to resound like music but void of any genuine joy. "Sanctuary, is it? My dear, remember that a sanctuary must be well guarded. Is it not your job to keep this place in order?" She emphasized her words, and I felt the prickle of indignation at being reduced to a mere caretaker in her eyes, my aspirations vanishing like wisps of smoke. "In this house, sanctuary is but a delusion, my lady." My pulse raced as I caught her surprised expression, and a flicker of satisfaction stirred within me for having dared to voice such a truth. "Careful, Ella," she warned, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You would not want to lose your precious position for such a slip." A calculated smirk spread across her lips, the sharpness of her gaze cutting deeper into my skin than any rebuke from her husband. The conversation lingered in the air between us like a tangled thread of smoke, thick with implications. As she straightened, re-establishing the distance between us, I found myself yearning to retake the shadows, the darkness a comforting embrace against her calculated cruelty. "Consider this a reminder," Lady Beatrice intoned, her final words coated in silk and laced with poison. "Our lives are made of choices, and some paths lead only to ruin." With that she turned, the soft rustle of her dress trailing behind her, a ghostly reminder of her presence. I was left alone in the suffocating silence, her calculated cruelty ringing in my ears. With the corridors of Pembroke Manor closing in, I felt like a prisoner within a gilded cage, shackled by the very same people who whispered of refinement and virtue. Chapter 2: The Black Mirror. I often found myself drawn to the attic's dim embrace, where the relics of forgotten days lay thick with dust and secrets, whispering to me in voices I could not quite understand. In that cramped space, among the boxed memories and the skeletal remains of discarded furnishings, I discovered an elegance that both haunted and enthralled, the tarnished black mirror draped in faded sheets, beckoning like a long-lost friend beneath a shroud of neglect. Each time I ascended the narrow stairs, my heart thrummed in synchrony with the creaking wood, a rhythm of dread and longing. I wove between stacks of old books, their spines cracked and titles faded, as my fingers brushed against their textured surfaces, sending ripples of nostalgia coursing through me. These were my companions, each tome a universe untapped, each story a spark to light the dark corners of my mind, if only I could escape the mundane demands of my daily existence. With cautious reverence, I reached for the heavy, dusty sheets that draped the mirror. I could feel the tension swell in the still air, a pregnant pause before revelation. My fingers caught the fabric and pulled it away, unveiling the reflective surface. In that moment, the world around me blurred, replaced by the mirror's singular focus, and it caught a brief glimmer, a ripple dancing across the glass like a secret threatening to escape. Dust motes swirled in the sudden draft, their chaotic movement contrasting with my stillness, and a sense of unease washed over me. Before I could indulge in the enigma of the mirror, the heavy footfalls of polished boots shattered the reverie, each click against the worn boards, a reminder of the reality that awaited outside this sanctuary. "Ella, get moving. I need to be ready for the ball," Cecilia Pembroke commanded sharply, her tone slicing through the dust-laden air. I turned quickly, the mirror's allure slipping from my grasp like a wisp of smoke. There she stood, a tower of privilege, disdain etched across her perfectly coiffed features. A shudder coursed through me at the sight of her, an imperious statue crafted from alabaster and arrogance. The light in the attic dimmed in her presence, swallowed by the storm that accompanied her, the aura of authority that dared to trample the delicate balance of my thoughts. "Of course, Miss Pembroke," I replied, forcing the words from my lips with the practiced deference expected of a maid. I gathered the garments scattered amongst the relics, a whirlwind of silk and lace that had known only the luxury of grand soirees. The layers felt heavy in my hands, as if they too bore the weight of unspoken expectations. My mind raced as I piled the fabrics, a jumble of emotions warring within me. Each item represented not only the beauty that would adorn Cecilia, but the chains binding me to the life I so fervently despised. I could feel the disdain pouring from her, sharp and precise, slicing through the thin veil of my self-worth. It wasn't just her voice, it was the way she looked through me, seeing only a reflection of utility, a specter whose sole purpose was to serve, to vanish into the shadows of her grand existence. As I draped a delicate dress across my arm, my gaze was unwillingly drawn back to the mirror, its surface still rippling ever so slightly, as if aware of my turmoil. A soft flicker teased at the edge of my vision, a reminder of the possibilities held within that glass, secrets I had yet to unravel. I felt a tug of longing beneath my skin, a whisper that urged me to linger just a moment longer, to decipher the story woven in its depths. "Ella," Cecilia snapped, her impatience crackling through the air like static, forcing me to break from the mirror's thrall. I hurried to complete my task, the mirror's eerie beauty lingering in my thoughts as I made my way through the debris of dreams stacked high around me, burdened by an awareness that my own reflections might hold darker secrets than those of the glass. The remnants of the attic whispered to me as I worked, the ghosts of lives lived and lost, remnants of long-forgotten aspirations. I could feel their eyes watching, invisible yet palpable, judging me in my servitude. Yet there, amidst the tension and resentment, a flicker of rebellion ignited within me, daring to rise above the expectations laid upon my shoulders. But all too quickly, the moment dissipated as I offered up Cecilia's garments, my own desires shrouded beneath the weight of her gaze. I caught her reflection fleetingly in the mirror, a portrait of perfection frozen in disdain, before it became just another distant echo, swallowed by the shadowed corners of my reality. The mirror, dark and mysterious, remained, silently beckoning, a reminder of my own unresolved fate lingering just out of reach. The moon hung high that night, a solitary sentinel in the velvet sky, as I crept back up the narrow stairs, each step creaking beneath my careful weight. The attic called to me, a siren of solitude beckoning for exploration. I had learned to find solace in its dusty embrace, hidden among the shadows and the stories, away from the oppressive gaze of those I served. In the dim light of the solitary candle I brought with me, the attic transformed, revealing a world where memories whispered and hopes lay interred. I took my place before the uncovered mirror once more, its tarnished frame shimmering softly in the flickering light, an ancient relic steeped in secrets. As I settled into the space around me, a profound stillness enveloped me, offering a quiet respite from the suffocating weight of my life below. The cracked floorboards beneath my feet felt familiar, each groan and sigh echoing the sorrow of many years lived in this manner. With a sense of reverence, I placed the candle in front of me, watching its glow expand to fill the empty corners, illuminating the dust motes that danced in its warmth. My heart raced at the prospect of unveiling the stories layered in this forgotten room, and I took a deep breath as I unfurled the fragile pages of my worn copy of Dr. Faustus. Each leaf seemed imbued with the ghosts of the past, my fingers trembling slightly as I traced the faded print with care. I began to read aloud, letting my voice rise and fall like the waves of a distant sea, the words slipping from my lips with a gravity that sent ripples through the stale air. When we are born, we come into this world with a capacity for knowledge and sin, I intoned, the rhythm of Marlowe's verses intertwining with the beating of my heart. The attic around me seemed to exhale, a shift palpable in the dust-heavy air, as the themes of ambition and consequence resonated deep within. As I spoke, the mirror responded, its surface undulating as if caught in a breathless dream. Unnerving flashes flickered against the glass, momentary glimpses of movement that sent chills down my spine. Each line I read seemed to beckon a whisper from the depths, a reflection of my own longings and fears coalescing in the darkness. With every syllable, I felt a connection deepen, an understanding that intertwined my own yearning with Faustus' tragic tale. What art thou that dost seek? What has the world to offer? I continued, my words gathering strength, my spirit aching to break free from the chains that bound me. My mind swam with visions of grandeur and despair, as I recognized my own ambition, mirrored in the tormented soul who dared to dream beyond mortal limits. And then, as if conjured from my very thoughts, the mirror pulsed with intensity, rippling more forcefully, offering fleeting impressions that felt all too familiar. I caught glimpses of my own reflection, not merely a young maid lost in the service of a cold family, but a figure clad in confidence, weaving through the hallowed halls of power. There were shadows dancing in the edges of the glass, momentary flares of emotion, frustration, rage, desire. I paused, captivated by the strange dance that unfolded before me, an unholy marriage of light and darkness. A soft sigh escaped my lips as I read on, entranced by the visions, teetering on the precipice of dread and exhilaration. Ah, Faustus, you have dabbled in dark magic, what shall be the cost? It was then that I sensed it, a presence within the mirror, distinct and unsettling. The air crackled with a peculiar energy that both terrified and thrilled me. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, an awareness that drew closer, wrapping around me like a vine with intentions unknown. As I chanted each line with fervor, it seemed as though the mirror sought to unveil my innermost secrets, mirroring my turmoil back to me with sharp clarity. I could feel the flickering candlelight shudder against the wall, as if warning me to cease this sacrilege of introspection. The voices from the mirror grew louder, not through words, but through an unspeakable understanding. "What do you wish for?" they echoed, a chilling chorus urging me to confront my desires. In that haunted space, caught between realms, I found myself enraptured by the struggle, the fragile veil between reality and ambition slipping through my fingers. My heart raced, caught in the seductive allure of a power that promised escape from my confines. The mirror, with its dark and mysterious depths, held the keys to a fate I dared not yet fully understand. I could scarcely breathe, the weight of possibilities crashing over me. With each passing moment, the unease within me swelled, igniting a rebellion that I had long suppressed. I realized I was not merely an observer. I was part of the reflection, a protagonist in a story that promised transformation. I whispered aloud, almost against my will, "To know oneself, one must venture into the depths of despair." The candle flickered violently, casting wild shadows against the walls as the air grew heavy with the unknown. I felt the pull of the mirror calling to me, demanding attention. What waited in that polished surface? What truths, veiled in darkness, were yet to be revealed? I was on the edge of understanding, teetering toward an abyss that felt both alluring and treacherous. Yet before I could descend into its depths, a cold gust swept through the attic, extinguishing the candle in an abrupt swirl of darkness. I gasped, and in that brief moment of vulnerability, I was alone, confronted by the silent judgment of the mirror, its rippled surface now offering only a reflection of uncertainty. In the lingering shadows, I felt the echo of a promise forgotten, a connection severed but never entirely lost. And there, as the silence enveloped me, I understood that the mirror, as much a prison as it was a portal, would demand from me a reckoning I was yet unprepared to face. Chapter 3: The Wish Granter Appears. The attic was a sepulchre of forgotten dreams, where the dust settled on the remnants of lives once lived. I placed the tattered pages of Dr. Faustus upon the creaking wooden table, feeling the weight of the silence around me, as the flickering candlelight danced over the inked words, illuminating my aspirations in fleeting, wavering strokes. I straightened my back, the weight of my servitude momentarily lifted, and stepped toward the imposing black mirror, draped in the pall of forgotten years, yearning to unearth its mysteries. With each cautious step, I felt the cool air surrounding me, mingling with the dust motes that floated languidly in the meager light. This room, a haven of forgotten tales, whispered promises of knowledge to me, a seductive lullaby to an unbroken spirit. I often found solace here among the shadows, far away from the gaze of my stepfather, a man whose cruelty seeped through every corner of Pembroke Manor like a foul stench. My heart ached with unexpressed rebellion, but it found nourishment in the words of poets and the musings of philosophers, which spiraled me away from the stone walls of my existence. I had stolen the Dr. Faustus from the library, a precious volume that spoke of aspirations stretching beyond the mortal coil, of bargains made with shadows, a narrative far more tantalizing than my own. I imagined myself entwined in such exploits, weaving the threads of fate, yet reality gnawed at me with icy fingers, reminding me of my confinement. Those words stirred an inner fire, igniting the flickers of my desires, tempered only by the steel chains of my circumstance. As I turned my gaze toward the mirror, its dark frame loomed with an ominous presence, and I felt the shadows coalesce, the weight of its significance pressing against my chest. The sheets covering it were heavy, dusty relics that echoed the age of the manor itself, which held secrets I could only dare to dream of unearthing. With trembling hands, I lifted the heavy fabric, revealing the glass beneath, a canvas reflecting not only the shapes of the world around me, but perhaps the depths of my soul. The surface shimmered, not with the brilliance of light, but in subtle undulations, a void that seemed to pulse with ancient energy. I leaned closer, captivated, as if it were drawing me into its dark embrace. It felt as though the room held its breath, and the stillness enveloped me, interrupted only by the soft, relentless tick of a distant clock, a metronome of reality reminding me of time's unyielding passage. I brushed my fingers along the smooth frame, cool to the touch, as I felt an exhilarating thrill coursing through my veins. The elegant contours of the mirror contrasted with the crumbling walls of the attic, an otherworldly piece of artistry at odds with the grim remnants of my life. The echoes of whispers passed through my thoughts, begging me to ponder the weight of my own desires, to lean further into the unknown, to shatter the boundaries of my existence. In that moment, an anticipation thrummed beneath my skin. I stood at the precipice of something significant, something both terrifying and exhilarating, wondering if I dared to plunge into those depths where shadows danced with allure. The rustling of paper as I returned to Dr. Faustus was a mere prelude, a ghostly promise of transformation hovering in the air around me. My heartbeat quickened, synchronizing with the faint creaking of the old house, as if the very walls conspired to weave fate's tapestry. Still, my hesitance held me captive, the conflict of yearning for knowledge and the specter of caution clawing at my conscience. Here, within the dimly lit sanctuary of the attic, I felt both alive and ensnared, drawn irresistibly toward the shimmering abyss where possibilities threatened to upend the fragile order of my world. The air became thick with expectation, and I could almost feel the threads of destiny tightening around me, whispering in silken tones that I had yet to hear. And so I waited, the candle flickering precariously as if signaling the dusk of that serene moment. Time curled in on itself, heavy with anticipation, each second a measured heartbeat of longing, an echo of desires yet unfulfilled. I closed my eyes briefly, drawing in a breath as the darkness of the mirror deepened, ready to embrace whatever shadows awaited me within. In that quiet sanctuary, amid the rustling of paper and the soft scrape of my footsteps, the calm suspended before the inevitable disruption lingered like a prelude to an untold symphony. As I gazed into the shimmering depths of the mirror, the air around me seemed to thicken, vibrating with a tense energy that crackled like static. My heart raced, a wild drumbeat that echoed in the stillness of the attic, while the dark surface writhed and pulsed, drawing me in, whispering promises of power and possibilities that chilled my blood even as they ignited a flame of longing in my chest. Something ancient and unfathomable awaited me beyond the glass, and I could feel the very fabric of reality quiver in anticipation, a prelude to the horror and wonder that would soon unfurl before my eyes. In that moment, the mirror became alive, a monstrous breath catching within its depths. Its surface rippled as if stirred by an invisible hand, and dread mingled with exhilaration in my gut. Shadows swirled and coalesced, an invitation beckoning me closer, until I felt the thin veil of safety dissolve. With my breath caught in my throat, I remained motionless, heart thrumming as the obscured presence stirred. Then, from the depths of the blackened abyss, it emerged, a fluid, shadowy figure clad in shifting dark garments that seemed to absorb the very light around it. The entity exuded an unsettling grace, moving with a predatory elegance that made my skin crawl and my breath hitch. Unblinking eyes, depths of unfathomable night, fixed upon me, and I felt their gaze penetrate my very soul. 7 wishes for your soul, it intoned, voice both chilling and seducing, every syllable draped in an eerie politeness that barely masked the malevolence lurking just beneath. Each word lingered in the air, suspended like a weightless promise, my resolve weakening in its oppressive aura. I could scarcely grasp what I felt, fear intermingled with a morbid curiosity, as my fingers trembled at my sides, itching to reach out to that cold surface where dark energy surged visibly around us. The candle flames sputtered, struggling against the encroaching shadows, casting contorted silhouettes that danced on the walls. Everything around me grew distant, muted, as the heartbeat of the house pounded, alive with something far older and more sinister than myself. "What would you wish for, little maid?" the figure asked, its voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere all at once, piercing the silence with an almost playful menace. "You dream of knowledge, freedom, perhaps a touch of power? I can grant you your desires, set you on a path where you may not be constrained by those who keep you bound." I stood paralyzed, teetering on the edge of a chasm filled with enticing possibilities and soul-rending consequences. The pulse of my heartbeat quickened, synchronizing with the flicker of the candle, a silent battle raging within. My every aspiration sprang to the forefront of my mind, draped in vibrant longing, yet they bore a dark shadow that whispered of corruption. What would it cost me? With every passing second, I sensed my ambition clashing with an all-consuming fear. 7 wishes. The very notion sent tremors through my spine. The mirror's depths taunted me, shadows intertwining like serpents, leaving a sickly sweet taste in my mouth. My mind flashed with the promise of freedom from servitude, an escape from the smothering confines of Pembroke Manor. But at what price? Was I willing to barter away my essence, piece by fragile piece, for fleeting desires? I remembered my mother, the way her laughter was silenced, replaced by the cold grasp of death and despair. I could hear the echoes of her warnings in my mind, the haunting whispers of a soul once bright, now turned to ash. "Don't linger too long in indecision, dear child," the figure purred, drawing me in with an otherworldly allure, the subtle menace weaving through their polished words. "Time is a commodity, and I offer you a glimpse of power that few ever taste." I hesitated, torn between the allure of the offered power and the desperate instincts urging me to flee from its grasp. I thought of the stories woven into the pages of my stolen book, the tantalizing dreams mingling with horrific fates, tangled in a web of ambition. I felt the pull of the shadows, a siren song inviting me to take that leap, to plunge into the depths where I could transform my existence. In that heartbeat of reckoning, I took a step forward, as if against my will. My fingertips brushed the cool surface of the mirror, the sensation sharp and jarring. Energy surged between us, a current that raced through my veins, overwhelming in its potency. The moment extended into infinity, as I braced for whatever the darkness would bring. A silence wrapped around us, echoing with unuttered promises and sealed fates. It was in that stillness that I realized the pact had been made, a silent agreement written in the annals of the unknown, a step into the abyss that resonated with my heartbeat, marking the end of one life and the tumultuous beginning of another. Chapter 4. A Taste of Power. In the hushed confines of the attic, where sunlight dared not penetrate, I stood before the black mirror, its surface dark and ripple-free, a portal to a world I scarcely understood. Dust motes danced in the slant of faded light, whispering tales of long-forgotten shadows, as I cradled Dr. Faustus, its worn pages imbued with longing, the ink my trembling fingers traced glowing with an unsettling promise. The attic, a sanctuary of neglect, was littered with relics that had succumbed to time's grip, faded drapes draping themselves over battered furniture and crates of forgotten memories. In the dim, oppressive atmosphere, a sense of despair seeped into my bones, each creak of wood beneath my feet like a lingering sigh from those who had traversed this place before me. The air was thick with dust, mingling with the faint scent of mothballs, a reminder of decay lurking just beneath the surface of what was once cherished. It was here that the black mirror rested, perched atop a creaking wooden crate. It loomed, ominous and inviting, drawing me in with a gravity I found both thrilling and terrifying. This dark artifact, said to possess powers both wondrous and damned, beckoned me as if it shared my desperation for transformation. I was but a plain maid, trapped within the rigid confines of Pembroke Manor, yet every yearning that clawed at my heart whispered to me that I was destined for more than servitude. With hesitant fingers, I grasped the tattered copy of Dr. Faustus, its edges frayed, reflecting my own disheveled hopes. It had become a confidant, a window into aspirations forged from stories of ambition and despair. I recalled the stories I had read by candlelight, consuming each word as if it were a life raft. Could I too escape this cycle of drudgery? Could this mirror, the harbinger of Faustian bargains, deliver me from my mundane existence? The questions twisted in my mind like shadows that darted just out of sight. I lifted the book, my heart quickening as I began to read a passage aloud, my voice a mere whisper amongst the stillness. Each syllable tumbled forth, laced with the fervor of my unquenched desires. The mirror's surface quivered as though responding to my words, the air around it thickening with an electric charge, compelling and inexplicable. For a fleeting moment, I held my breath, captured in the cocoon of the mirror's mystery. Then a vision surged forth, my reflection shifted, rippling like disturbed water. I gasped, for in that moment, I was no longer the plain maid, my features transformed into a visage of breathtaking beauty. My hair cascaded in lustrous waves, catching the dim light with ethereal radiance, and my eyes sparkled with a luminescence that stole my breath. It was an impossible dream, a glimmer of hope overshadowed by the suffocating realities that bound me. In that transcendent instant, a feeling of power surged through me, threatening to consume the remnants of my former self. Who would I become if I allowed the mirror's influence to take root? Would I become a puppet of its dark whims, a mere reflection of a deeper malignancy? Yet the longing was palpable, whispering promises of liberation, daring me to embrace this ephemeral gift and abandon the shackles of my reality. I tore my gaze from the mirror, my heart racing as I gathered my modest dress and shawl. It felt as though the weight of centuries bore down on my shoulders, the expectations of servitude clamoring for my obedience. But I would not falter. There was a defiance igniting within me, a fierce determination to seize the moment that lay tantalizingly within reach. Adjusting my attire with deliberate motions, I summoned every ounce of courage to step back into the realm beyond the attic's shadows. The wooden staircase creaked beneath my weight as I made my way towards the narrow opening leading back to the manor, each echo a reminder of the vulnerability that awaited me beyond this sanctuary. I felt like a thief in the night, carrying secrets as I slipped through the dimly lit hallways, eager yet terrified of what lay ahead. With a final glance at the mirror, the reflection of beauty fading as swiftly as it had come, I pressed my palm to the attic door. It closed behind me, sealing away my fears even as a shiver of anticipation coursed through my veins. What awaited me in Pembroke Manor was unknown, but one truth shone through the uncertainty. I was determined to reclaim my narrative, whatever the cost. The grand ballroom welcomed me with open arms, its chandeliers casting their sparkling glow upon the polished marble floors, the warmth of laughter and murmured conversations cocooning the elegantly dressed guests in a bubble of indulgence. As I entered through the side door, the momentary silence that accompanied my arrival made the air shimmer with inspoken judgments, each gaze a tantalizing brushstroke against the canvas of my newfound self. The opulence of the setting engulfed me, the light filtered through prisms of crystal, splintering into a radiant spectrum that danced across gilded walls, illuminating the delicate silhouettes of women, adorned in exquisite gowns, and men clad in meticulously tailored suits. I marveled at the fluidity of the evening, where elegance and ostentation wove a tapestry of beauty that felt almost surreal, a world I had only glimpsed from the shadows. It was unsettling, yet intoxicating. As I stepped further into the ballroom, whispers of admiration fluttered around me, clinging to my form like gossamer threads. I could sense the shift in atmosphere as heads turned and conversations momentarily stilled. My heart thrummed in my chest, a mix of pride and trepidation coursed through my veins. Had my reflection in the mirror been but a fleeting illusion, or had I truly transformed? I smoothed the fabric of my gown, an action that felt both rehearsed and instinctive, as though it could solidify this change into something tangible. Yet beneath the surface of their polite smiles lay a treacherous current, hints of suspicion flickering like the candles adorning the grand room. Ladies cast sharp glances, eyes narrowed beneath finely plumed hats, while gentlemen exchanged dubious assessments over crystal glasses. I stood at the intersection of admiration and scorn, aware that in this world, acceptance was precariously balanced on the whim of perception. Amidst the flurry of faces, I caught sight of him, Henry Blackwood. He appeared as though sculpted from the very shadows that whispered through the hall, tall and elegantly dressed, wavy dark hair catching the light with effortless sophistication. Striking green eyes surveyed the room with an intensity that made me feel both exposed and tantalized. As he approached, my breath hitched, for he commanded the attention of the gathered elite, the very epitome of what society deemed worthy. His hand extended toward me with the grace of a practiced gentleman. "May I have this dance?" he inquired, his voice smooth as polished marble, each word carefully chosen to dance between formality and intimacy. As we glided onto the dance floor, the orchestra swelled, a waltz that seemed to envelop us in its melodious embrace. I felt the world around us dissolve into a mere backdrop. There existed only the rhythm of our movements, the connection that pulsed between us. His fingers encircled my waist, guiding me deftly as we twirled, in a fluid motion that left me breathless. It was a paradoxical harmony, a swirling mixture of elegance and peril, embodying everything that haunted my dreams. "Tell me, what do you think of this soiree?" Henry asked, his eyes sparkling with mischief as we swirled through the crowd, each step accentuating the latent tension that thrummed in the air. I offered a delicate smile, aware of the myriad pairs of eyes trained on us. "It is a grand affair, to be sure," I replied, my voice steady, but within me the turmoil raged. Though I suspect it hides as many secrets as it showcases beauty. "Ah, a perceptive observation," he noted, his gaze probing, teasing out my hidden depths, as if attempting to discern the layers beneath my polished exterior. Most attendees come to flaunt their masks, few are willing to reveal what lies beneath. The waltz bore us around the grand room, and I could sense others' gazes pinning us like butterflies against a glass display. Each dip and twirl tightened the invisible cords that connected our bodies, but also the scrutiny of those around us, whose admiration teetered dangerously close to envy. As we danced, the pulse of music wrapped itself around us, and I caught snippets of hushed conversations from onlookers, words dipped in envy and admiration. I became acutely aware of the delicate handling of fabric as I smoothed my gown, the gaze of the crowd like an unsettling tide, receding only to crash back with unrelenting ferocity. "There is something about you that captivates," Henry remarked, his voice low, barely breaking above the music's swell. "You possess a spark others merely strive to emulate. Are you not wary of being watched so?" "A little," I admitted, my heart a wild drum against my ribcage. "But perhaps it is exhilarating too. To dance on the knife edge between acceptance and scorn." "Very much so," he agreed, a shadow of mischief dancing in his eyes. I admire your resolve, but be wary, for in these gilded halls, the slightest misstep can shatter the illusion." As the waltz neared its close, the strains of the music reaching a grand crescendo, I felt exhilarated yet burdened, the electric tension between us making me hyper-aware of the rapid tick of time. It was intoxicating, the closeness, yet I could feel the tightening noose of expectation and scrutiny snaring me. The moment the dance ended, applause rang out, and yet it felt suffocating, the way the world moved on, barely noticing the heaviness that lingered. Henry offered a polite bow, but I could see the way the corners of his lips tugged with amusement, and it filled me with a dual desire to both linger in this connection and flee from it. Before I could fully process my feelings, I was once again confronted by the mingling crowd, their veiled compliments turning into pointed barbs of critique. I could feel the weight of their gazes sharpen around me, a chilling reminder of how quickly the tides could shift. "Do you not think it best to retreat?" Henry inquired, concern lacing his tone. I nodded, the ache of duality coursing through me, as I excused myself, weaving through the ballroom towards the edges of the crowd. I stepped away from the swirling depths of polished pleasantries, recognizing how swiftly the illusions could shatter, all while feeling the exhilaration of a newfound freedom, fighting against the stifling pressures that sought to ensnare me. And yet, as I stood on the precipice of my aspirations, a chill skittered down my spine, whispering warnings of the tempest that awaited me in the shadows beyond the ballroom's gleaming facade. As the clock's heavy chime reverberated through the grand hall, each strike seemed to pierce the illusion of joy that had held the ballroom captive, announcing the arrival of midnight. A heavy shroud fell over the guests, the ambiance shifting from celebratory revelry to an unsettling quiet, the echoes of laughter fading into an oppressive silence. It was as if the very air had turned thick with a foreboding dread, pressing against me, squeezing out the last remnants of joy I had grasped only moments prior. My gaze darted toward the imposing grandfather clock, its massive structure looming like a sentinel over the room. Time felt distorted, stretched taut like a string ready to snap. With each toll, I could feel the mirth of the evening dissipating, the fluttering excitement transformed into a disquieting uncertainty that settled heavily upon my shoulders. My pulse quickened, an instinctive response to the ebb of warmth and light, as an unsettling chill began to creep through the crowd. It was then that I noticed it, a shadow gathering at the periphery of the ballroom. The flicker of candlelight cast tremors upon the walls, causing dark forms to writhe and merge, the lines between reality and specter blurring as the whispers of the wish-granter threaded through my mind. An inexplicable dread flooded my senses, my thoughts a chaotic swell of questions I dared not articulate. Guests exchanged furtive glances, laughter replaced with a tight-lipped unease. Their smiles faltered, replaced by glimmers of suspicion and discomfort. I became acutely aware of the hushed tones surrounding me, discussions retreating to undercurrents too hushed for my ears to catch, yet the weight of their gazes pressed against me, judging, dissecting. I felt exposed beneath their scrutiny, as if they could sense the internal struggle brewing within me. With each breath, I fought against the thrumming tension that pressed ever closer, a sudden urge to flee blossoming like a flower under the light of a full moon. My heart raced, the uneasiness curling into a knot in my stomach as my fingers tightened against the folds of my gown. The mingling crowd began to disperse, slowly breaking away from the ballroom, an exodus that heightens the isolation settling over me. Just then, I locked eyes with Henry. He stood some paces away, confusion painting his features as he surveyed the unraveling atmosphere. But before I could process his concern, I felt the flickering shadows tugging at the edges of my vision, a chilling reminder of the choice I had made. The mirror's siren call echoed within, beckoning me into the darkness beyond. "I must go," I murmured, my voice barely breaking the silence, tinged with urgency and fear. I turned abruptly, unable to face the intensity in his gaze any longer, afraid of the connection I felt and the storm brewing in my chest. For a moment, I sensed the weight of his attention, a fleeting brush against the electric tension that buzzed between us. The space shifted, the words hanging unvoiced, as I slipped through the throng of guests, heart pounding with the echo of impending decisions. I could feel the whispers trail behind me, scandalized murmurs punctuating my flight from the glimmering but confining world of grandeur. I hurried through the dim side passage, my footsteps quickening with each breath that filled my lungs. The suffocating air of the ballroom was replaced by the biting chill of the night, cool and liberating, an instant cleansing of my turmoil. Outside, the world unfurled before me, a silvered canvas under the crescent moon, laden with the weight of choices yet unmade. Shadows of the manor stretched like accusing fingers behind me, each brick and crevice steeped in the desires and sins of its inhabitants. In that haunting expanse, I was both free and lost, teetering on the precipice between ambition and fear. As I pressed onward, the echoes of whispered hopes and haunting questions trailed me into the night, a promise of darkness lurking just beyond the veil of my resolve. The air was thick with anticipation, the chill embracing me even as I sought the warmth of newfound purpose. Chapter 5: Vengeance Unleashed. In the dim corridor outside Cecilia's chamber, shadows danced beneath the flickering candlelight, a dance of dread that felt all too familiar. I stood there, motionless, an unwilling witness to the unraveling of family, when the door creaked open. Out staggered the essence of beauty now marred, her pallid features trembling in the soft gloom. A spark of something darker ignited within me, a cruel thrill that I desperately tried to suppress. Cecilia clutched at her chest, fingers trembling as if attempting to grasp a heartbeat that had turned traitorous. Panic radiated off her, an invisible wave that pulled me closer even as my instincts screamed to retreat. She faltered on the threshold, hands flying to her throat, gasping for breath as her eyes, wide and shimmering, captured the horror she could neither articulate nor escape. The tightness in my own throat echoed hers as I beheld her unraveling, the mask of superiority slipping, if only for a moment. Then, like thunder erupting in an empty sky, Arthur burst from a nearby study. His brow was etched in fury as his cold gray eyes widened at the sight of his daughter, and he barked, "What devilry is this?" His footsteps were sharp and erratic against the worn floorboards, a predator keen to reclaim control. I shifted slightly, almost relishing the desperation that crept into his voice, the way it clawed at the air like the rasp of a dying breath. As he reached Cecilia, the very embodiment of authority teetered on the edge of chaos, the tightness in his features betraying a man forced to confront helplessness. A second too late, he bent to gather her up, arms encircling her frame, though how little warmth lay in his embrace. I suppressed a smirk, buried beneath the tightness in my chest, some mix of pity and malevolence stirring in a tempest of emotions. Lady Beatrice appeared at the end of the hall, a statue molded in ice. Her gloved hand tightened around a small fan, its surface trembling slightly in sync with her fluttering emotions. Though the gesture seemed trivial, I knew her well enough to read the silent alarm through the quick, darting glances exchanged with Arthur. She was assessing him, and in turn, analyzing Cecilia's feigned vulnerability for any weakness to exploit. Her lips pursed, carved into a mask of regal concern. And there I stood, merely an observer in this unfolding spectacle, yet all eyes turned to me. Mrs. Fowler hovered near the door, her own gaze unblinking, but fixed upon me as if I were the true conundrum within the chaos. Beneath her austere demeanor lay a watchfulness, a silent judgment of my role in this calamity, stirring something primal within me. But it was not only concern that gripped her. There was a wariness in her look, as she scrutinized my barely concealed smirk. Perhaps she recognized the twisted thrill that bubbled beneath my composed surface, or perhaps she sensed that I was no mere maid, but a player in this family's dark drama. The fragile threads of Cecilia's condition frayed in my mind as I lingered at the threshold, my heart leaping at the implications. The tension twisted and coiled like the storm brewing just beyond the manor's walls, electric and enticing, inviting the darker curiosities of my soul to writhe in the shadows. "Call for the doctors," Arthur's voice cracked through the air like a whip, jolting us all into motion. "This cannot be real." "She is not," his resolve shattered like glass upon the stone, yet in his eyes glimmered the promise of vengeance for the upheaval that dared sully his perfect world. As the flurry of servants rushed forth, the urgency in their steps mirrored the storm gathering inside me. I drew into myself, wrapped in the darkness that enveloped Pembroke Manor, and the chaos continued to unfurl before me. It was then I decided to slip away into the shadows, a smile dancing at the corners of my lips, my heart thrumming with the promise of something far more sinister lurking beneath this surface of genteel panic. For amid the unfolding turmoil, I was not merely a spectator, but a potential architect of devastation. Later, in the manor's sparsely furnished main hall, chaos reigned like a storm summoned by some dark sorcery, each fragment of distress swirling together in a tempest of disquiet. Arthur paced before a cluster of anxious servants, their whispers carrying the weight of trepidation, as they stole sidelong glances at the settee where Cecilia lay. The marble pillars loomed around us, witnesses to the turmoil that churned beneath our skin, and I found myself swept up in the currents of their fear, strangely invigorated. "I ought to have known this would come to pass," Arthur raged, each step cutting through the tense air like a sword. The manner in which he thrust his fists against the polished stone pillar spoke of a man who felt his authority slipping. His back remained straight as steel, yet the distress blurring his stern features was evident, a manifestation of a shattered image he could no longer maintain. Among the gathered servants, a whisper rippled like a gossamer thread. "Have you heard? It is as if a curse has befallen her." The words lingered, their potency drawing me in, anchoring the mood in the hall where fate and misfortune intertwined. The tall housemaid clutched her apron, as if it would shield her from the dread enveloping us all. Through the archway, the muffled sounds of medical tools clinking blended with murmurs of concern from the doctors, a cacophony of worry that clashed with Arthur's booming commands. He implored the cluster around him, demanding answers that hung like a noose. "This must end. Where is the wit of this household? My daughter lies stricken, as if—" I lingered at the doorway, a ghost amidst the living, my own heart a detached observer, trembling not in fear but in the thrill of power derived from this palpable disarray. Just beyond the hall, in a side room where shadows intertwined with the form of my lady, Cecilia lay prone, the vibrant life of a social butterfly dulled by the flurry of sterile hands. Inside that chamber, confusion reignited among the doctors, whose voices grew hushed, conducting their clandestine assessments. I could envision the tightening grip of worry etched upon Cecilia's brow, and the flames of her once fiery spirit flickering dangerously close to extinguishment. They sought answers yet offered none. It would not be long before whispers of more sinister forces would spread like ink in water. "What manner of sickness plagues her?" one of the physicians murmured, a gentleman of ample experience, but there was doubt in his tone. "I suspect the heart," but his fingers barely grazed her pulse, feeling as if he hesitated to touch what was draped beneath fate's maleficent shadow. Arthur's fist struck the marble pillar again, each resounding blow a testament to his increasing discontent. The echo filled the hall, merging with the tension, so thick I could almost taste it. But still, my gaze slid toward Lady Beatrice, pacing behind her husband, each measured movement practiced, and her eyes darting like twin daggers, assessing the gathered servants with an intensity that betrayed her own fears. I could sense the brewing storm between them, like two predators circling one another, sensing weakness in the other. Mrs. Fowler, a bastion of resolve among the disarray, stood staunchly nearby, eyes narrowed, observing Our Lady as though she too feared for her position, as if witnessing the frail human fabric fraying at the edges. And within that moment, it became clear. Lady Beatrice saw in Cecilia not merely her daughter, but a reflection of herself, a slip of privilege and perfection threatening to crumble. The hushed murmurs continued to dance through the air, filling the space with an undercurrent of suspicion. It was as if every servant held their breath, anticipating some unseen judgment. The wild thoughts of curses flitted about as nervous tongues unraveled a dark tale that pressed upon us all. But I found comfort in this unfolding chaos, a curious delight laced with bitterness, sparking a twisted joy beneath my carefully restrained demeanor. With each passing moment, the storm simmered in my veins. I caught Ella's eye across the hall, my lips curling into a slight, unreadable smile as I reveled in the turmoil unfurling before me, knowing that the threads binding this family together were fraying with every heartbeat. It was not merely a day of crisis, it was an opportunity cloaked in shadows. What if this is not sickness, but a curse? Arthur's voice broke through the tension, and in it lingered desperation mingled with outrage, pushing boundaries until silence became palpable. He demanded an answer, perhaps wishing for control in an uncontrolled world. I lingered there, feeling their anxious gaze press against me, savoring the gravity of this moment, a collision of fear and uncertainty tethered by the weight of secrets. As I slipped back into the shadows, enveloped by the chaos I would learn to navigate, a wicked thrill coursed through me, stirring memories of past grievances that whispered their promises of retribution. Today, Pembroke Manor bore witness not to the healing touch of compassion, but to a dark dance of fate that would etch itself into the very stone that cradled our woes. And within the depths of this turmoil, I found not just an audience, but a stage upon which to write the cruel chapters of our unfolding narrative, threading together the sins we were too scared to confront. Chapter 6: Ascension to Power. The study lay heavy with the scent of aged paper and dim light that seemed to shun brightness, much like its master. As I stepped into the room, my gown whispering against the oak floorboards, I was acutely aware of the shadows that danced in the corners, a reflection of the man I was about to face. My heart thrummed, each beat echoing with defiance against the cruel weight of my station, and the heavy tick of the clock served as a grim reminder of the confrontation that awaited me. Arthur Pembroke, my stepfather, loomed behind a massive oak desk, his imposing figure stark against the chaos of ledgers and sealed letters scattered across its surface. The shadows fell across his graying hair like dark whispers of the past, a past he wielded like a weapon against all who dared challenge his authority. His hand trembled slightly as it flipped through documents, a rare crack in the facade of command he typically maintained. For a fleeting moment, the man who inspired fear became a desperate creature, yearning for control. I would not let him see my smile. The clerk who had shuffled into the room carried a stack of signed documents, his eyes darting nervously between Arthur and me, an unwilling witness to the tempest brewing beneath our social niceties. The nervousness in his stance told me more than any pleasantries exchanged. He understood the severity of this moment. His fingers trembled with the documents as he placed them upon the desk with a faint clatter that echoed in the oppressive air. With every step I took forward, I could feel the gaze of my stepfather burning into me, a palpable pressure suffocating the very space around us. I knew what I had to do. My heart drummed defiantly against the constraints of my previous existence. I reached into the folds of my gown, extracting another envelope, a sealed promise, before placing it deliberately on the desk, defiant and poised. Arthur's expression darkened as his gaze shifted to the envelope. A flicker of rage crossed his features like a cloud over the sun, and the silence snapped. "What have you done?" he bellowed, the rawness of his voice resonating through the dim room, filled with unsaid words and the weight of expectations. The tremor in his fist sent tremors of dread curling in the pit of my stomach. How he relished wielding his authority like a sharp blade, ready to cut down the heart of all hope in this manner. The clerk shrank back, eyes wide as if anticipating a storm to break. The relentless ticking of the clock began to punctuate the stillness, each second resonating with tension that seemed to stretch on infinitely. My heart quickened, battling with the rising tide of anxiety that Arthur radiated, a battle I would not lose. "I have claimed my due," I replied, every word infused with purpose as I met his glare. In that moment, the air crackled with something dark and forbidding. I felt the very walls of the study close in around me, urging me to flee, and yet refusing to grant me the exit. Arthur's jaw clenched tight, his fingers digging into the polished surface of the desk, fighting against some invisible force threatening to consume him. "You're due. You think you can seize what was never yours? A maid does not assume a mantle not meant for her." His voice dripped with disdain, and I watched with determination as he wrestled to reassert his grip on power, on me. In that moment, I recognized that he would do anything to protect his false hierarchy. The tension continued to coil like a snake, ready to strike, and I knew this was not merely a disagreement. It was a battle over my spirit, one that Arthur had waged before I could even understand its cruel implications. The sharp weight of the envelope, the promise of a life beyond his oppression, suddenly felt like a challenge thrown into the abyss. But I had faced darkness before and emerged somewhat untouched, though scarred. The voice that trembled inside me rose above the oppressive weight of silence. "I am not your possession, nor a mere reflection of your will," I asserted, trembling but resolute, my heart echoing against the wooden floor beneath my feet. The clerk shifted uncomfortably, and the heavy clock ticked on, mocking the silence as we locked gazes, the master and the challenger. I felt the air thicken, charged with an unspoken animosity, and the slow, deliberate unfolding of my defiance. As Arthur's anger radiated, I stood firm, prepared to meet the storm, unaware that my life had already been irrevocably altered. The cramped auction room felt suffocating, the air heavy with the weight of forgotten histories and crumpled contracts that whispered in the flickering candlelight. I stood beside the long, polished table, the smell of rain seeping through the narrow windows intertwining with the ink-stained remnants of lives once lived. As I prepared to sign my name, a flood of nerves swelled within me, mingling with the electric thrill of claiming a future far from the shackles of my past. The table sprawled out before me like a battlefield littered with the remnants of others' dreams, piles of parchment contracts and faded quills, each one steeped in echoes of desire. I could sense the weight of their stories, the whispers of those who had come before me, tethered to objects long traded for hope. My heart thrummed to a rhythm that matched the relentless drumming of rain against the glass, each drop punctuating my resolve with an urgent sense of purpose. As I waited for the notary to arrive, I clutched my gloved hand around the small stack of documents, a talisman of sorts, as I swallowed hard against the swell of anxiety that churned within me. This act would signify my break from servitude, yet the vulnerability lingered, shadowing my every thought. I sensed a fateful turning of the page, not only for myself, but for Pembroke Manor, once a place of confinement, that now threatened to cradle new possibilities within its walls. The notary finally approached, his ink-stained fingers contrasting sharply against the delicate parchment. There was something disquieting about his presence. The way his eyes flickered to my documents held an undertone of scrutiny. "Madam," he began with a formality that felt both comforting and alien, "we are ready to finalize your arrangements." His voice trailed like a forgotten promise, laden with unacknowledged implications. I nodded, attempting to steady my breath as he read aloud the terms, the sacrifices, the privileges, the blurred lines of my fate, hidden within elaborate ink strokes. Each word he pronounced clawed at my heart with equal parts fear and exhilaration. This was the moment, the crescendo of ambition harmonizing with dread. I reached for the quill, its feather delicate and worn, and felt an exhilarating jolt as I grasped it firmly. The act of signing was more than a mere formality, it was a pledge to claim my existence. With each stroke of my signature, I could feel the weight of what I was leaving behind, the pain, the shackles of my former life clinking away into shadows of memory. The world shifted as I inscribed my name, drawing the ink across the parchment. I closed my eyes, relishing the exhilarating taste of freedom, a potent elixir, potent enough to drown the doubts that clung to the back of my mind. Yet, as I completed the final stroke, a shiver rippled through the room, a brief fleeting presence that crossed my peripheral vision. A shadow flickered, a wisp of darkness swallowed by the candlelight's warmth. It lingered just beyond the edge of sight, something not quite right in the ether of reality. The notary seemed oblivious, continuing to murmur, "Congratulations, madam," his smile dull against the encroaching specter of unease. I gathered the documents into my gloved hands, determination washing over me like a sudden surge of storm-driven waves. But as I turned from the table, a tremor crept into my heart, the unnerving feeling of being watched. The air felt heavier now, pregnant with the promise of change, a prelude to an unfamiliar chorus yet unsung. The rain drummed on the windows, masking my apprehension as I pushed through the auction room's narrow confines. The shadow danced within me, twined in the fabric of my newfound resolution, a reminder that any transition, no matter how triumphant, bore a price, a lesson I would come to know too well. The corridor breathed with a heavy stillness, the flickering sconces casting erratic shadows that danced upon the aged walls, whispering secrets of the manor's dark past. I moved with purpose, my footsteps echoing softly as I processed the weight of my recent decision, the newly signed contract tucked safely away. Every creak of the floorboards sang of memories long past, a warning that both called to me and kept me tethered. As I turned a corner, the dim light caught the outline of Thomas Ashton, standing still with a set of keys dangling from his fingers, like an unexpected light cutting through the dense fog of uncertainty. His hazel eyes met mine, and a wave of familiarity washed over me, erasing the oppressive shadows that loomed just out of sight. He had a gentle demeanor that enveloped me, yet fatigue lined his features, hinting at the burdens we both shared beneath this manor's roof. "Miss Pembroke, will you have a moment?" he asked softly, his voice barely rising above the steady drip of water from the stone ceiling. A kindness infused his words, offering a moment of respite in a day wrought with turmoil. "Yes," I replied, nodding as a fragment of warmth unfurled within me. I gestured toward the alcove nestled deeper in the corridor, a secluded space wrapped in muted shadows and promise. We stepped into its embrace, the air heavy yet comforting, holding the secrets that bound us. My heart raced, and I could sense the pulsating shadows just behind us, dark reminders that our newfound hopes were shadowed by uncertainties. As we lingered in the alcove, The atmosphere shifted, tension crackling between us like the electric charge before a storm. His gaze fell upon my attire, the dress that symbolized both triumph and transition, yet he did not let the weight of my past cloud his vision of me. It was a fleeting acknowledgement, a bridge between the lives we had lived. "I heard of your new arrangements," he said carefully, a glint of curiosity in his eyes that betrayed deeper concern. "It's a brave step, Miss Pembroke." "I had no choice," I replied, the words escaping my lips with more fervor than intended. Staying in the manor was akin to shackling myself to the past. I wanted to live. The truth of that statement hung in the air like an unanswered prayer, potent yet tinged with the shadow of what was yet to come. "I admire your courage." His words lingered, a testament to the support he had always shown, gentle yet unyielding against the harsh winds of reality. But the shadow danced behind him, lurking just beyond the alcove's threshold. I could feel its presence, something sinister trailing us, yet I fought to focus on the warmth emanating from Thomas. Our hands brushed briefly as he passed me a small stack of keys, the contact lingering just a second too long before we both stepped back, respect and uncertainty layering upon our shared silence. "I wish you the best in your endeavors, Ella," he said, his voice a calming balm in a tumultuous world, even as I felt the whisper of dread crawl back into my heart. The weight of that promise carried an invisible anchor, grounding me even in the chaos surrounding my life's impending changes. Yet, as we began to part ways, that same unsettling sensation washed over me again, an awareness of the shadow that echoed my steps, the darkness persistently lurking at the edges of my consciousness. In a world filled with light and potential, it threatened to plunge me back into a pit of despair. I took one last glance at Thomas, the flicker of understanding illuminating the space between us, but with each step I took into the enveloping gloom, the whispering dark threatened to rise and reclaim what it believed was its. Chapter 7: The Corrupting Touch. As I glided through the grand ballroom of Pembroke Manor, the gilded mirrors gazed back at me with an air of judgment, their ornate frames heavy with secrets. The flicker of gaslight danced upon the velvet draperies, casting shadows that clung to the corners like hushed whispers of the past. Each welcome I offered was steeped in the refined etiquette expected of me, yet beneath that practiced politeness surged an undercurrent of unnameable dread, a throbbing pulse that quickened with each elegant step. Clusters of elegantly dressed socialites enveloped me in a haze of laughter and flirtation, their gowns rustling like whispers of forbidden desires. I balanced a silver tray of refreshments, crystal glasses glimmering under the radiant chandeliers, brimming with the night's finest offerings. Their eyes, bright with mirth, failed to recognize the heart beneath my servant's mask, a heart that beat fiercely against the constraints of my station. With every polite nod and serene smile, I wielded my status like a shield, deflecting the sharp barbs of disdain that flickered in the air. It was a waltz of sorts, a dance of appearances, and I moved gracefully, albeit with attention strung tightly within. I watched, studied, and memorized. The feathered tips of fans and the lacquered surfaces of gloves were familiar friends, yet I yearned for something beyond these oppressive walls, something more intoxicating than the clinking of glasses and frivolous chatter. Pausing briefly by a window, I felt the cool night air slip through the cracks, a ghostly touch against my skin. It caught my breath, an electric thrill that coursed through me, leaving an unusual gleam in my brown eyes. Did the guests notice? There was one, an observant woman draped in lavender, who caught my gaze and tilted her head quizzically, as if drawn by an unseen thread. "Ella, darling," she smiled, yet her words tasted like poison. "What a pity you cannot join in the revelry." A practiced reply rested on my lips, but the moment dulled with the chill that settled within. The intricate patterns of the ballroom, woven through reflections and glances, felt distorted in that brief pause, shadows pooling at my feet as if beckoning me to step closer to something I could not quite grasp. But I offered her a smile that barely reached my eyes. "Indeed, the night bestows many gifts," I said, resuming my path, my spirit tugging behind me like a chain. I continued weaving through the crowd, the delicate porcelain skin of my fingers brushing against polished tables, momentarily connecting with the glittering remnants of joy left behind. Each interaction echoed in the hollow space of my chest, a greeting met with charming smiles or indifferent glances, a whirlwind of aspirations and masked truths swirling around me. Yet there, amidst the radiant whirl, the thrill of the unknown gnawed at the edges of my mind like a hungry specter. My heart raced, but not for the fear of falling out of step, but for what lay hidden behind the lavish facades, the intertwining lives and dark whispers, the shadowy figure lurking at the periphery of my vision, the faint impression of something watching, a silent presence reflected in the polished glass. The party spun on, draped in silk and deception. I felt the unsettling stir of anticipation unfurling, a prelude to an unfolding tale, but I was just a maid carrying a silver tray, a whisper amidst the ballads of the wealthy and powerful. I held tightly to that tray, where my hands shook subtly, and the weight of secrets yet to be told loomed heavier than the fine china nestled upon it. And I wondered, for perhaps the first time in my life, what it truly meant to be both seen and unseen, welcomed and yet always apart. As I navigated the maze of laughter and clinking glasses, my gaze fell upon him, Henry Blackwood, a striking figure near the gleaming candelabras, framed by the golden glow of their flickering light. He stood in quiet confidence, a blend of elegance and restlessness, and my heart fluttered dangerously as I took a step closer, the crowd parting for my timid approach. His presence felt like a beacon, drawing me in with an intoxicating pull, yet the unyielding boundaries of my status made each step heavy with uncertainty. There was something in the way he carried himself, an undercurrent of intelligence that sparked curiosity, and for a moment my responsibilities fell away as I became lost in the intensity of his striking green eyes. "Good evening, Miss Pembroke," he greeted with a disarming smile that was both polite and sincere, yet hinted at mischief just beneath the surface. "You appear as if the night has gifted you with radiant light." I felt the flush rise in my cheeks, and there was a tremor in my voice as I replied, "The night bestows many gifts, Mr. Blackwood. But perhaps I am merely reflecting the glory of those around me." With a flick of his wrist, he invited me to join him, and I placed my gloved hand in his with a nervous flutter. The world melted away as he guided me onto the polished marble dance floor, our reflections intermingling in the swirling patterns below. As we moved together, the enchanting music wrapped around us like a cocoon, and the weight of the outside world began to dissipate. His hand rested cautiously on my waist, a warmth igniting where our bodies touched, and I surrendered to the rhythm of the waltz. Each step was a delicate exchange, a play of power and vulnerability, and I could feel his breath against my ear as he murmured, "You look radiant tonight." "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper caught in the rapture of the moment. "And you always possess an air of quiet mystery." The words hung between us, a thread binding our souls momentarily. We danced on, weaving through the crowd, drawing the attention of envious glances and hushed whispers. I could sense their scrutiny, but I remained fixated on him, the sharp line of his jaw and the way his wavy dark hair caught the light. "Tell me," he continued, his tone shifting to one of earnestness, "what dreams linger in that clever mind of yours? Surely you yearn for more than the confines of this estate." The question struck a chord deep within me. With every twirl, The desire for something greater surged through my veins like a living, breathing entity. I glanced away for just a moment, as if trying to glean clarity from the distance before meeting his penetrating gaze once again. I dream of escaping these walls and immersing myself in worlds beyond, an existence where words and ideas hold more power than titles and lineage. A knowing smile danced upon his lips. Ah, but titles can bind, yet they can also grant access to the greatest of stories. Perhaps our paths may entwine in the unlikeliest of ways, don't you think? His words promised intrigue, and beneath the weight of them, I felt a surge of hope mixed with fear, the walls of Pembroke Manor looming in my mind like an ever-present specter. Yet here, in this dance, we moved in sync, a harmony of hope and trepidation, until I could no longer decipher where his hand ended and I began. Ella. A call echoed through the air, sharp and dismissive, piercing the reverie that enveloped us. It was Lady Beatrice Pembroke, her cold gaze cutting across the room to pin me in place. Make yourself useful, child. I require another round of refreshments. With reluctance, I felt the delicate tether to Henry's snap as I stepped away. His fingers lingered just a moment longer, a touch that left an electric charge between us, but propriety dictated that I respond to the call of my station. Of course, my lady, I managed, offering a curtsy before I retreated, aware of the eyes that followed my every move. Yet even as I returned to the chaos of the party, my thoughts clung to the moment, a waltz shared, a connection forged, now but a whisper in the wind, leaving a taste of what could be. In the dim alcove behind the paneled oak wall, a world apart from the vibrancy of the ballroom, Lillian Moore leaned over a small work table, her delicate fingers deftly maneuvering between needles and threads. The air was thick with the scent of fabric and dust, and the soft murmur of the ongoing festivities flowed through the cracks like a distant lullaby, reminding us of the glories we served and the hidden shadows that tainted them. I'm afraid something isn't right tonight, she murmured, tapping a pair of delicate scissors rhythmically against the table, the sound a soft protest against the laughter and music echoing from the other room. Her brows knitted together in concern as she caught sight of Ella mingling with the guests, her figure radiant amidst the opulent displays, yet a flicker of unease settled into Lillian's chest. Thomas Ashton stood nearby, his posture alert yet relaxed, exuding a quiet strength. He had watched Ella's subtle transformations with an empathetic eye, recognizing the shadows cast by her smile. You think she feels it too? The strange tension? He asked softly, casting a glance towards the ballroom where the glimmering chandeliers swayed above a throng lost in revelry. Lillian tilted her head, her emerald eyes reflecting the muted glow of candlelight as she followed his gaze. It is as if the very air crackles around her, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I've noticed it in her eyes, the gleam, you know? Something otherworldly. The unease settled like a heavy mist around them. The manor holds too many secrets, and she? He paused, his voice trailing off, but Lillian could feel the weight of his unspoken thoughts. They both understood the peril lurking within those gilded walls. Whispers of the wish-granter carried through the estate like spectral echoes, shadows of those who had made choices they could never retract. I fear for her, Lillian continued, the scissors stilling in her hand as her heart tightened. A kind spirit like hers, surrounded by such greed and pretense. She deserves to soar above these chains. Her fingers trembled slightly, a reminder of her own aspirations lost amid the patterns of life dictated by society. Thomas stepped closer, the warmth of his presence comforting yet heavy with the knowledge of their station. We have seen what happens when desires and bargains intertwine. She must tread carefully among those who see her as little more than a servant. A shared glance passed between them, a fleeting moment where the noise of the ballroom faded, leaving only the weight of their connection. Two souls drawn together by their empathy for Ella, by their shared understanding of the darkness that seemed to thrive within the manor. They were custodians of each other's thoughts, hearts weighed down with hope and despair, threaded through the tapestry of their lives like an intricate stitch. Just then, a voice cut through the distance, startling them both. It was Lady Beatrice, her sharp tones slicing through the air like a blade, calling for Ella again, demanding attention. Lillian and Thomas exchanged knowing looks before turning back to their respective tasks, the fabric of their worries settling into the background. But the lingering sense of dread remained, a whisper against their skin. Lillian resumed her work, deftly sewing pieces together while the distant laughter echoed through the walls, a reminder that the world outside was vibrant and carefree, yet within them brewed an unsettling storm that only the three of them could foresee. As the hours passed, the ambiance around them thickened, and it was not lost on either of them that their friendship, however fragile it was, stood on the precipice of something darker, a portent of storms yet to come, unseen and brewing just beyond the veil of polite conversation. Chapter 8: Whispers of the Past. The library door swung open with a groan, and I was engulfed in the stale air thick with the dust of ages. Each inhalation sent a tremor through my being, an unsettling reminder that within these towering shelves, time stood still while the outside world hastened by. I ventured deeper, a wayward spirit amid the memories that clung to every cracked leather cover, promising stories just waiting to be unveiled. As I stepped across the threshold, the weight of silence pressed upon me, a tangible presence in the vast room lined with oak. The shadows loomed, intimate and unforgiving, merging with the elongated spines of countless tomes that whispered of the Pembroke lineage. Their surfaces burdened by layers of dust, the shelves rose like the guardians of forgotten secrets, a testament to both grandeur and neglect. The creaking wooden floor beneath me protested with each cautious step, a symphony of sound that echoed my hesitations, amplifying the solitude that encased me. I traversed the distance to a cluster of journals, my heart thrumming a beat of both fear and exhilaration, and placed my hands on the antique oak desk that bore the scars of history. My fingers, calloused yet elegant from years of labor, moved along the cracked leather covers, each touch igniting an ember of curiosity within me. Here lay pieces of the Pembroke legacy, documented and ensconced within the fragile confines of parchment. My breath caught as I carefully lifted one of the journals, its weight a promise of revelations concealed beneath the surface. The leather was cold against my skin, its texture reassuringly familiar, yet intimidating in its authority. I flicked through its yellowed pages, each turn stirring the dust that lay like a shroud over their contents, and paused at a page marked with an unfamiliar seal, an emblem I had never seen before, veiled in shadow and mystery. A chill crept through me as I contemplated the meaning of that mark, a harbinger of untold tales woven with threads of ambition, failure, and the slow, inevitable crawl of regret. Would I be prepared to face whatever lies ahead? This chamber of lost knowledge sang to my very core, igniting a yearning that had festered in silence since my mother's departure from this world. I craved to decipher the echoes of her memory, intertwined with the written words, a quest for understanding that could shatter the fragile walls I had constructed. With each careful flip of the pages, I found myself drifting further into a reverie filled with fleeting thoughts of a different life, a world unfettered by servitude, where the aspirations of a young maid were not buried beneath the cruel weight of circumstance. Anguish intertwined with curiosity, propelling me deeper into that journal's embrace, yet the creeping shadows of my current existence threatened to pull me back. I had little choice but to immerse myself further into its depths, yet dread coiled tightly around my heart, reminding me that knowledge often bore consequences. Just then, as if summoned by the tumultuous thoughts stirring within, the flickering candle flames sputtered against the cold air, wavering with an erratic dance that mirrored my racing heart. For a moment, the shadows deepened, forming shapes that stretched unnaturally across the ornate floor tiles. I looked back at the desk, instinctively clutching the journal closer, when the sensation of unseen eyes settled upon me, heightening the electric tension crackling in the dim light. What was it that I had unearthed? The whispers of the past beckoned, yet I was fully aware that each truth I sought might echo with horrors I dared not confront. Thus the library became my sanctuary, a hallowed space draped in secrets waiting to ensnare me. The darkness thrummed alive around me as I steeled myself for the journey ahead, with only my determination and the shimmering light of flickering candles to guide my way. The soft sound of footsteps broke the silence, the polished boots of Dr. Walter Ambrose making their presence known even before I could fully comprehend. He entered the library with an elegance that contrasted sharply against the disarray of dust and shadows, a tangible breath of the outside world entering the mausoleum of forgotten knowledge. His tailored coat billowed slightly, giving him an air of authority that I found both intimidating and enticing, as if he were a specter beckoning me toward enlightenment. His gaze landed upon me, piercing yet kind, as he adjusted the round spectacles perched upon his nose, a gesture so ordinary yet infused with purpose. "Ah, I see we have an intrepid explorer in the realm of forgotten tales," he said, his voice a hushed murmur filled with gentle warmth, enveloping the space like a whispered incantation. I felt the flush of heat creep into my cheeks, the flush of both embarrassment and exhilaration. To be acknowledged thus felt like a rare treasure, plucked from obscurity. I stood transfixed, torn between my station as a mere maid and the sudden inclination to engage with this learned man. I stumbled over my words, the world outside my mind a murky fog, as he strode closer to the desk, his movements imbued with the gravitas of someone unafraid to tread into shadow. He leaned over the journal I had clutched, the pages crinkling beneath our touch as we hovered together, an unlikely pair gathered around the lore of the Pembrokes. "These entries date back to the Pembroke ancestry," he said, his voice carrying the weight of each syllable with deliberate precision. A tension danced in the air, our breaths mingling as he traced a finger along the embossed cover, leading me into a landscape of histories long past. With each selected passage he recited, a picture of the Pembroke family unfolded, tales of triumph intertwined with wretched folly, dark omens cloaked in the innocence of youth. His tone was clipped and observant, punctuated by the careful rhythm of his scholarly mind. I leaned closer, captivated, swallowing down the shroud of my own aspirations that echoed within me, merging with the past. "I never imagined such richness lurked behind these walls," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. The shadows danced along the edges of our discourse, veiling secrets that lay just beyond our reach. The flickering candlelight illuminated Dr. Ambrose's features, casting him in a ghostly glow, as if he were an oracle revealing hidden truths only I dared to discover. Moments passed in shared silence, marked only by the soft rustle of parchment and the low murmur of our dialogue, a rare communion of minds flourishing within a tomb of time. My heart pounded against my ribs, a steady reminder of the walls closing in around me, both thrilling and terrifying as the shadows whispered of desires unfulfilled. "Within these entries there are warnings," he continued, his voice lowering to an almost conspiratorial tone. I sensed the shift, the tightening air that followed his words like a warning echoing through the recesses of my mind. Yet, curiosity eclipsed my caution, as I clung to each sentence, drowning in the lore he unraveled before me. The atmosphere, heavy with unspoken anxieties, shifted further, a mere reflection of my own apprehension. Unseen currents stirred within the room, weaving a tapestry of unease that raised the fine hairs on my arms. I glanced at the window behind Dr. Ambrose, the darkness beyond stretching like fingers seeking entry. Could it be that our exploration of this family history would entangle us in dangers unbeknownst? A whisper snaked through my mind, threading together the sinister weight of our endeavor, as Dr. Ambrose paused, leaving unspoken truths dangling like cobwebs in the air. I turned back to him, searching for a hint of what lay beneath his scholarly demeanor, a flicker of fear or certainty, something to ground us against the encroaching shadows that seemed ever more eager to consume the light. "There is much more to these pages than mere words," he said finally, the finality in his voice carrying the weight of a hidden truth I yearned to uncover. Just as the atmosphere thickened with anticipation, a shiver rippled through the room as the world outside slipped further into darkness, dimming the candle's glow until it nearly extinguished. With our connection forged over secrets and whispers, the night stretched before us, an expanse of darkness filled with the potential for revelation and dread. In that moment, I knew that we were teetering on the edge of an abyss, where every new discovery would demand a sacrifice. The air grew thick around us, the solemn weight of history clinging like a second skin as we continued our examination of the journal. With each shared insight, an invisible thread bound us closer, yet the atmosphere teetered precariously between knowledge and the specter of the unknown, a foreboding reminder of the price one pays for uncovering secrets better left buried. I could feel the tide of unease ebbing and flowing, a subtle tension crackling beneath our discourse. The candle flames flickered, casting erratic shadows that leapt and skittered along the walls, mirroring the heartbeat of the room. "Here," Dr. Ambrose said, his voice a studied murmur as he pointed to a passage with ancient ink. "This is where the family's darkest secrets begin to unravel." I leaned closer, eager to decipher the intricacies of the tale, yet uneasiness fluttered at the edges of my consciousness. Such sorrow, such ambition, each member tried to surpass the next, yet the result. He trailed off, the weight of his words hanging suspended, like a blade poised for a fall. A gust of air swept through the room, impossible, for the windows were sealed tight, and I felt a tremor in the floorboards beneath my feet, reverberating through the air like a whispered warning. My breath quickened, every instinct clamoring for clarity amidst the chaos. The shadows around us thickened, creeping closer like the chilling embrace of an unknown entity, tightening their grip upon the flickering flames that cast glimmers of light dancing chaotically. For an instant, it felt as if time had decelerated, suffocating our conversation beneath an ominous weight. Without warning, a sudden rustle echoed through the air, jarring me from my thoughts, sending ripples of dread curling down my spine. A cluster of loose pages from an old journal fluttered forth, as if compelled by an unseen force, casting themselves across the desk without the slightest hint of a breeze. My heart thudded in response, each pulse echoing the instinct to flee, while I remained rooted in place, suspended between fear and the allure of knowledge. "It's just the drafts, isn't it?" I whispered, desperation creeping into my voice as I glanced towards Dr. Ambrose, hoping to find reassurance in his calm demeanor. But even as I searched his expression, I noted a shift. His brow furrowed, and he leaned further into the shadows, his attention captured by the echoes that trickled from the depths of the library, muffled whispers layering the atmosphere with disquieting intrigue. "What are they saying?" I breathed, the question trembling in my throat like a beckoning phantom. His gaze flickered towards the tall window, the dim light of dusk filtering through the panes, transforming the library into an ever darker sepulchre. "There is a long history entwined with this estate, A tale woven with both beauty and tragedy, he murmured, his attention drawn to the view beyond. As he approached the window, my eyes drifted outwards, my pulse quickening as I saw the faint outline of dark figures congregating in the overgrown courtyard below. Instinctively, I pressed closer, fear rising like a tide, obscuring my thoughts. Who were they? What did they seek? A chill clawed at my skin, even as the inexplicable urge to uncover more entwined me deeper into this narrative of dread. At that moment, as shadows gathered in thick clusters, a heavy book on the highest shelf toppled abruptly, slamming down onto the table with an audible thud that shattered our reverie. It resonated through the stillness of the library, the sound echoing like the ominous toll of a bell, heralding some unwelcome truth as I drew back, clutching the journal to my chest in a futile effort to shield myself from the weight of revelation. We stood there, suspended in the heavy air of unknowing, our breaths mingling with the secrets cloaked in silence. The darkness that gathered around us bore witness to the awakening of something ancient and unfathomable, something that stirred in the depths of Pembroke Manor, waiting for its story to be told, a tale ensnaring us, pulling us deeper into its seductive grasp. Chapter 9: The Fractured Reflection. As I stood before the black mirror in the crumbling attic, a chill slithered down my spine, tightening around my heart like an unwelcome vice. The space, once vibrant with laughter, now exhaled despair, its peeling plaster walls closing in like specters of a forgotten past. With trembling hands, I grasped the aged copy of Dr. Faustus, its pages whispering secrets of ambition and despair. As my voice wove through the stillness, echoing in the shadows that clung to every corner. I lingered on the words that I had rehearsed countless times, my breath catching at the notion of what they could summon, how they could alter my mundane existence as a maid in Pembroke Manor. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight, an unsettling reminder of my station, but here, in this sanctuary of neglect, I dared to dream. Oh, grant me a wish. My voice trembled, trembling like the ghostly flames of a forgotten candle. I swallowed hard, forcing the dread from my throat, a life beyond this wretched servitude. Each word weighed heavier than the last, layered with desperation, as if by mere utterance I could birth change into my stagnant life. The mirror's surface shimmered, responding to my desires. It rippled, waves of darkness undulating like a sinister tide, eager to consume. The familiar sight of my maid's uniform began to distort, flickering momentarily into the semblance of a tattered dress, a gown of dreams drenched in longing. A quiet horror settled in my gut, whispering secrets of folly as I swayed on my feet, unable to tear my gaze away from the swirling reflections. It was then that the silence shattered, punctuated by the sound of rusted hinges groaning from deep within the manor. I staggered backward, my heart drumming in a frantic rhythm, darting my eyes around the attic, as the very walls seemed to shift with a consciousness of their own. Time warped around me, each second stretching into an eternity. In the claustrophobic confines of this space, it felt as though I had summoned something other, something lurking just beyond the veil of my reality. The oppressive atmosphere clung to me, clawing at my resolve, and I could feel the chilling breath of fate wrapped around my throat. Just as I turned, my body heavy with dread, I sensed a deeper darkness unfurling from the corner of the attic, and my breath stuttered in my chest. Just as the darkness within the mirror coiled tighter around me, an urgent noise cut through the suffocating stillness, footsteps, hurried and resolute, shattering the fragile spell that had entranced me. I barely had time to register the creak of the attic door before he burst in, his familiar silhouette a beacon amidst the shadows. Thomas's wide hazel eyes met mine, filled with a mix of concern and determination, and I could almost feel the warmth of his presence pushing back against the chill. "Ella, hold on," he urged, his voice clear and urgent as he stepped toward me. His grip on my arm was firm, grounding me as my swaying grew more pronounced. There was a calmness about him, a steadfast resolve that battled against the encroaching terror of the moment. I searched his face for assurance, clinging to the flicker of hope that came from being seen, even as the mirror's surface warped and writhed behind me. Just then, Lillian followed close behind, her striking copper curls catching the meager light as she steadied me with a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was a gentle reminder of the real world, contrasting starkly with the impending darkness. "What's happening, Ella?" Her voice was soft, but threaded with an undercurrent of panic that barely masked her empathy. My gaze flickered back to the mirror, where a darker silhouette was beginning to coalesce, an elongated shadow clawing its way through the rippling surface. The air grew thick, suffocating, and I felt a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. Something is coming," I whispered, barely able to form the words. The horror of the unknown sent tendrils of dread lacing through my chest, constricting my breath. Our eyes remained transfixed on the shifting reflection as it sharpened and grew more defined, something cold and predatory lurking just beneath the surface, beckoning with an unseen malevolence. I felt the weight of my heart pounding in my ears, matched only by the resounding silence that enveloped us, a darkness that promised danger. With a sudden crash, a loose sheet of fabric fell to the ground, the sound piercing through the oppressive stillness like a warning bell. I staggered slightly, half aware of Thomas's grip tightening instinctively, as Lillian's steadying hand on my shoulder began to feel less comforting, and more like a lifeline. In that split second we shared a fleeting glance, a silent recognition of the peril we faced together. "Ella, step back," Lillian urged, her voice now a hushed command as her eyes darted nervously toward the mirror, apprehensive of the thing forming behind its glassy barrier. I sensed a primal instinct to obey, but a part of me, stubborn and unyielding, found itself rooted to the spot, tethered by a fear both dark and compelling. The silhouette in the mirror flickered again, its presence urging me closer, drawing my curiosity like moth to flame, while Thomas's face reflected pure determination, willing to shield me from whatever unspeakable fate was waiting to unveil itself. The corridor beyond the attic twisted into a labyrinth of impossibility, the walls undulating like a creature's flesh, grotesque and living. Each doorway loomed ominously, warped into forms that hinted at forgotten secrets, while a palpable sense of dread thickened the air. I moved hesitantly beside Thomas, who strode forth, his presence a comforting bastion against the uncertainty swirling around us. As I brushed against the coarse surfaces that vibrated with some malignant energy, an unsettling realization dawned. Pembroke Manor had long ceased to be a home. It had become a prison fashioned of nightmares. "Stay close," Thomas murmured, his voice the only thing that tethered me to sanity as we progressed deeper into the corridor's disarray. I felt his hand on my back, gentle but guiding, pushing me forward against the tide of creeping horror that lapped at my heels. My heart raced in tandem with the flurry of shapes and colors that swirled around us, reflections of despair lighting my mind with flashes of a past that was no longer mine. As we ventured deeper, Lillian pointed toward a dust-covered table that had emerged from the shadows, an apparition of something once cherished. "Look," she urged, her voice straining against the pervasive silence. A long-forgotten maid's uniform lay imprinted in the dust, its faded form a reminder of the lives once lived within these walls, and my chest tightened at the sight. The weight of time pressed upon me. I could almost feel the fabric brushing against my fingers, and the scent of old laundry filled my lungs. "I remember her," I whispered, nostalgia intertwining with sorrow, the bittersweet ache of forgotten identity. "She used to work here, before." My voice trailed off, as the dark reality surrounding us refused to be ignored. But before I could contemplate the tragedy of that history, I sensed it, the presence lurking just out of sight. From the corner of my eye, a shadow moved, shifting along the distorted surfaces. My pulse quickened, instinctively urging me to turn, yet my body remained glued to the spot. The wish-granter's form, now more corporeal, began to take shape with unsettling elegance, their dark flowing garments seeming to absorb the light around them. I could feel the air crackling with menace as they slithered toward us, grace underscored by a predatory intent. My heart pounded in my ears as they extended a hand, elongated fingers brushing against the glassy surface of reality itself, reaching toward me as if time and space melted between our worlds. "Ella," Lillian warned, her voice tremulous yet unyielding, a desperate attempt to shield me from the beckoning darkness. I turned to Thomas, the steady gaze in his hazel eyes mirroring my own dread. The urge to flee burned within me, clashing against the morbid curiosity that bound my feet to the spot. I felt the weight of the moment stretch into something unbearable, every heartbeat suspended as we hovered on the brink of further disarray. With my heart lodged in my throat, I instinctively reached toward the looming shadow, an outstretched hand trembling against the abyss of possibility. In that terrible instant, we were all aware, whatever was coming, whatever bargain awaited us, had the potential to alter everything we understood about our lives and our souls. Chapter 10: A Dance with Darkness. As I stepped into the grand ballroom of Pembroke Manor, my heart quickened beneath my carefully pressed dress. The air pulsed with hushed conversations, a whispering tide of ornate masks and lavish costumes, concealing hidden motives beneath layers of silk and satin. I could feel the weight of their gazes, spectators cloaked in shadows, their laughter a melody tinged with contempt and admiration. I moved forward, my posture slightly bowed, hoping to elude the scrutinizing eyes, yet each step drew me deeper into the throbbing pulse of the masquerade, where dreams danced unfulfilled and the past cast long, dark shadows. The ballroom glittered under the soft glow of the chandeliers, their lights shimmering like captured stars, though the beauty surrounding me only intensified the disquiet in my heart. The towering mirrors, framed around the room, reflected not just the elegance of the evening, but echoed my hidden fears, the possibility of being seen and judged by all those around me. Each masked face bore witness to my journey, as I navigated through a sea of laughter that rang hollow to my ears. It was then that I caught a glimpse of him, the master's son Henry, poised and striking in his attire, his mask an ornate guise that could not conceal his charm. Our eyes met amidst the swirling chaos of revelers, and he extended a gloved hand, a gesture both inviting and fraught with unspoken potential. "May I have this dance?" he asked, his voice smooth as honey but weighted with promise. A small, curt smile crossed my lips, and I found myself nodding before I had the chance to hesitate. The conflict swirled within me. This spark of hope and desire flickered against the shadows of my station, but I stepped forward, drawn by the allure of fleeting escape. As I took his hand, a gentle warmth enveloped me. In contrast to my humble existence, Henry embodied the very essence of aristocracy, his movements fluid and refined. Together, we swayed on the polished marble floor, the music weaving around us like an ephemeral shroud. I allowed myself to momentarily forget my station, enveloped in the rhythm of the dance, yet the weight of my reality hung heavy like a pall. Not far behind us, I caught sight of Thomas, who offered me a brief, respectful bow. His earnest eyes held an understanding, a comforting anchor amidst the opulence. Though his servant's garb marked him, his spirit shone like a beacon. Together, we shared unspoken words, a bond formed through shared suffering within the confines of Pembroke Manor. Despite the splendor around us, the whispered torments of our past encroached, lingering like shadows at the fringes. But as the music swelled, strange occurrences punctured the air. Cracks suddenly spider-webbed across the nearest mirrors, reflections fracturing like delicate glass, disrupting the illusion we had all woven around ourselves. Gasps fluttered through the crowd, a cascade of shock that briefly halted the dance. A chill coiled around my spine, tightening as a cluster of candles, their flickering flames devoured by darkness, extinguished, plunging portions of the hall into an abyss of muted shadows. From the edge of the gathering, the flicker of a presence caught my eye, and my breath caught in my throat. There, near the towering antique mirror, stood the figure that sent chills racing through my veins, the wish-granter. They lingered in the periphery, shrouded in a fluid form that defied the natural world, their shifting shape absorbing the light around them, becoming an enigma draped in shadows. A deep pulse of dread intertwined with the threads of the masquerade as whispers emerged, the unmistakable timbre of their voice echoing through the chamber in a precise Victorian tone, laced with danger. "Do you suppose this is the cost of power?" they mused, the very words dripping with malice. The sudden tension rippled through the assembly as Henry paused mid-step, brow furrowed in puzzlement. "Have you seen that?" he asked, turning his gaze toward the figure. A chilling silence fell, a collective intake of breath echoing around the room as unease settled over us. The melody faded, becoming nothing more than a whisper against the backdrop of the growing darkness that danced in the corners of our consciousness, leaving us teetering on the brink of an unknown precipice. The anticipation stilled my heart as I stood caught between worlds, one vibrant and alive with the superficial beauty of the masquerade, and another twisted with lurking terrors. I knew in that moment that whatever games were unfolding, they would require me to delve deeper into the shadows, and what awaited me in the depths would demand a reckoning with the truths I had long sought to bury. Chapter 11. The Final Wish. The study of Pembroke Manor loomed before me, a hallowed chamber where dust mingled with shadows, and the weight of centuries pressed down like an unseen shroud. My gaze lingered on the oak desk, marred by the stains of spilled ink and the relics of forgotten thoughts, as a single candle flickered, casting eerie shapes across the walls like phantoms from the past. Here, in this cramped sanctuary of wisdom and folly, I stood on the precipice of a world unseen, a world whispered of only in the hushed tones of literature and fear. Dr. Walter Ambrose sat hunched over a brittle grimoire, his graying beard stroking the thin, yellowed pages with careful precision. Each rustle of paper echoed in the stillness, accompanied by the heavy tick of the clock on the mantelpiece, counting down the moments to some uncertain fate. I watched him, this esteemed scholar who had crossed the boundaries of mundane knowledge to dance in the darkness of the arcane, his presence commanding yet enveloped in a cloak of scholarly vulnerability. "Ella," he said, his voice low and measured, the cadence imbued with an ancient caution that sent a shiver through me. "The consequences of this path may be far greater than you imagine." His gloved fingers pointed to a page laden with cryptic symbols. My pulse quickened at their alien allure, a siren call that reached into the depths of my very soul. With trembling hands, I gingerly turned over a fragile parchment, its edges crumbling like the threads of hope I so desperately sought to weave. I nodded slowly, forcing my mind to grasp the enormity of our undertaking, even as anticipation bloomed with reckless abandon in my chest. Here lay the answers I had long sought, waiting within this fragile book, tethered to my insatiable curiosity and yearning for freedom from my subjugated existence. Dr. Ambrose's brow furrowed as he scrutinized the text, his voice deepening with gravitas. "These words hold power, Ella. They demand respect, not reckless ambition. The bargains they promise come at a cost, one that might bind you in ways you cannot yet comprehend. His eyes glimmered with a mix of apprehension and admiration, as if he perceived the fiery determination that propelled me forward. "It is knowledge, Professor," I retorted, trying to cloak my trepidation with conviction. "Knowledge can free us. Is that not worth the risk?" The shadows seemed to gather around us, weaving closer with my defiance, eager to consume what light we had managed to kindle in the darkness. He sighed, the weight of my words pressing down upon him as he leaned back, stroking his beard with the weight of unsaid truths hanging between us. "Freedom without wisdom is a precipice, one that many have plummeted from." His gaze met mine, and in that moment I could feel the ancient knowledge of countless failures etched within his eyes. "Then let us tread carefully," I replied, drawing from my determination as if it were the very air I breathed. The prospect of failure sent a wave of warmth cascading through me, clashing with the cold embrace of doubt. I would navigate these murky waters. I had to. In our exchange, the fragile parchment slipped from my fingers, falling with a soft rustle to the cluttered desk, disrupting the heavy stillness that clung to the room. The shadows seemed to quiver, morphing as the candlelight wavered, filling the air with a lingering promise, a promise I was unwilling to resist. "Perhaps you are right, Ella," Dr. Ambrose conceded after a lengthy pause, his voice barely above a whisper. "But understand this, with every decision, every incantation, you weave your fate. The very fabric of your existence may unravel, just as easily as it can bind you to a power that defies the very laws of nature." His hands moved over the pages, as though they were alive, as though they were warning me in their own right. As the clock's heavy ticking underscored the charged silence, I remained transfixed, drawn deeper into the abyss of possibility. Each word he spoke resonated within me, a dull echo of impending doom and the sweet nectar of ambition intertwined. The study transformed into a battleground, where knowledge clashed with morality. I could almost hear the screams of those who had come before me, the whispers of their forgotten tales clawing at my conscience. Yet, like a moth drawn to the flickering flame, I could not turn away. "Let's examine these further," I murmured, my heart racing. My hands tingled with an electric tension as I dared to reach for the secrets hidden within. The parchment crinkled under my touch, a reminder of the fragility of the moment, of the fragility of life itself. The shadows thickened, and my breath quickened as we delved deeper into the world of the arcane, where every choice morphed into a potential downfall, every whisper of power cradled danger like a sleeping serpent. The night unfurled its darkness, and we found ourselves dancing upon the razor's edge, lingering between the known and the unknowable, forever chasing the light even as the shadows writhed and beckoned. The air hung thick with tension in the study, as shadows warped and writhed with each flicker of candlelight, carrying whispers from beyond the pages we studied. My pulse raced, echoing the timeless cadences of the clock, as the oppressive silence closed in, almost conspiratorial in its intensity, while outside, an uncanny rustling stirred through the mansion, raising the hair on the back of my neck. "Ella, focus," Dr. Ambrose urged, his voice taut as a string ready to snap. He remained transfixed by the grimoire, but I could sense the tension crackling in the air like static electricity, pooling around us as if we were at the eye of a gathering storm. My heart thudded in rhythm with the unease that seeped through the manor's ancient walls. A sharp metallic creak, slicing through our concentration, reverberated down the main corridor, drawing our eyes toward the heavy door. Time suspended itself in that fleeting moment, as our breaths hitched, a fear-laden pause encased in disbelief. Shadows lengthened and curled in the corners of the room, flickering specters lingering just beyond the reach of comprehension. The world outside transformed into something akin to a living being, breathing, shifting, unsettling. As we stared, a pale figure glided past the frosted glass of a side window, a vision wrapped in the tattered remnants of antique finery, the ghostly apparition sending a jolt through my spine. I gripped the edge of the desk, trying to ground myself, my heart pounding a frantic tattoo of apprehension. The figure flickered, barely perceptible, but there, a haunting reflection of a forgotten past. Dr. Ambrose was swift to react, rising from his seat with all the grace of a seasoned scholar seasoned with dread, securing the window shutters as though locking away some unfathomable terror. "Stay here," he instructed, his voice a blend of authority and palpable anxiety. "It's best you do not engage." I nodded, the instinct to flee battling the magnetic pull of my curiosity. Yet, against all reason, I crossed the room toward the dusty wooden floor, where faint impressions lingered like whispers of some spectral visitation. There they beckoned, a disordered alignment of footprints leading from one corner to the other, barely discernible beneath the shroud of dust that coated the manor's floorboards. I knelt, straining to catch any lingering hint of what might have passed. "Keep your voice steady," Dr. Ambrose murmured, his focus flicking back to the window as though the unseen presence might slip inside if we merely dared to breathe too loudly. A tremor ran through my body, equal parts fear and an almost reckless intrigue, as the heavy silence enveloped us. Outside, I could hear the eerie echo of shuffling footsteps, each sound slicing through the stillness like a razor's edge, subtle but omnipresent, woven into the fabric of this ancient dwelling. Could it be a spirit? I asked, barely above a whisper, as if uttering the words would summon it back to us. Dr. Ambrose's face clouded with thought, but he remained vigilant, the shadows playing upon his features. "It could be," he said, his gaze trained outward, the words hanging heavily in the air. "But such entities are often more malevolent than we imagine." The flickering candlelight bathed us in intermittent pools of warmth, each light illuminating the depths of his concern. I turned back to examine the footprints with increased intensity, feeling the cold prickle of something more than mere superstition curling around my spine. "There are traces." I pointed, breathless, a surge of adrenaline causing my pulse to quicken. Someone was here. Dr. Ambrose's attention momentarily diverted back to me, his brow furrowing deeper, revealing a hint of appreciation for my insight. "Ghosts do not simply walk, they echo memories, regrets, desires unfulfilled." He turned to the desk where the grimoire lay open, the dark words spilling forth like sinister secrets longing to be heard. "But what if these memories can be unraveled?" I asked, my voice trembling with the urgency that throbbed within my chest. The notion ignited a fire in my veins, the dark magic becoming a seductive allure that twisted my curiosity into an insatiable hunger. The prospect of reclaiming what was lost appealed to me in ways I could scarcely articulate. Ambrose's expression softened, though worry lingered in his eyes. "Every spell you weave comes at a price, and some shadows wish to reclaim what they've lost. Or take more than they were ever meant to." With those words settling like a cold mist between us, I returned to the footprints, contemplating the figures drawn in the dust, the ethereal presence fading away into the weight of the atmosphere. The manor seemed alive, wrapped in silence that pulsed with menace, every sound building in tension until it nearly exploded, the walls echoing the hidden conflicts that broiled within. The candle's glow flickered, the shadows dancing with newfound vigor, while the symphony of unseen doors slamming and soft echoes persisted in the corridors beyond. Here we stood, two souls straddling the abyss, poised to tread the lines between knowledge and oblivion. As if awakened from some slumber, I turned back to Ambrose, our shared apprehension merging into a tangible force that could not be ignored. The stakes were higher than mere knowledge. This was a confrontation with shadows, a challenge I had long sought, but the dangers now felt palpably real. A murmur of a storm brewing just beyond the safety of the study's candlelit sanctuary. The dim corridor wrapped around us like a shroud, the flickering lanterns casting tenuous light upon the cold stone walls as we labored to fortify the heavy door, our breaths mingling with the chill that seeped from the shadows. Each push against the splintered wood reverberated in the stillness, transforming the silence into an ever-tightening coil, a barely contained surge of dread that thrummed beneath our skin. Thomas Ashton and Lillian Moore worked side by side, their gloved hands pressing against the weathered door, drawing strength from their mutual resolve. I could see the weariness etched upon Thomas's kind features, though his spirit remained unyielding, steadfast against the oppressive air that seemed to crush us from all sides. Lillian caught her breath, adjusting the flickering lantern in her hand, the small flames struggling against the encroaching darkness. "This will hold for now, won't it?" Thomas asked, his voice steady but tinged with uncertainty as he wiped the sweat from his brow. I watched his eyes dart around the dimly lit corridor, as if expecting the shadows to reach out and snatch him into the void. Lillian responded, a slight smile breaking through her anxiety. "With the way this door looks, I'm not sure it ever stood a chance." Her tone held a teasing lilt, masking the trepidation that lingered just below the surface. Together, they showcased a courage that whispered promises of solidarity, reminding me of the ties that bound us within this ancient manor. Across the narrow passage, Henry Blackwood knelt beside the shattered fragment of the black mirror, careful not to graze the jagged edges with his fingertips as he murmured, "This artifact is bleeding darkness." His keen green eyes pierced through the fraying edges of our reality, a vortex of intellectual curiosity and an unsettling sense of foreboding. "What do you mean, Henry?" Lillian inquired, her expression shifting as concern threaded through her words. I could see the question weighing heavily on her mind, demanding answers that were all too difficult to articulate. "This mirror," he explained, his voice steady, though beneath it lurked an undercurrent of tension. "It serves as a portal, a reflection of the darkness lurking just beyond our perception. The shards contain remnants of power entwined with despair, drawing whatever has been lost back toward it." His gaze lingered on the fragmented piece, as if it possessed the key to unlocking our greatest fears, or perhaps the darkness itself that we fought against. As the three of us exchanged glances laden with unspoken fears, a noise echoed from the depths of the corridor, a soft shuffle that clawed at the edges of our consciousness. I felt a jolt of panic, the pulsing dread squeezing my heart as the candlelight flickered and trembled, casting wraith-like shadows along the walls. "Quickly, let's finish this," Thomas urged, shifting back into motion with purpose. We resumed our task, pouring every ounce of strength into pushing against the door as we fought to contain the impending dark that threatened to seep inside, seeking refuge among us. The manor's ancient structure groaned under the weight of our labor, each push against the door marked by a frail harmony of grunts and hasty breaths. "It feels like it's alive," Lillian remarked, laughter catching in her throat even as dread pooled in her stomach. "A hungry creature yearning to consume us all." The three of us exchanged grim nods, acknowledging the truth nestled within her jest, a fragile thread that bound us together amidst the gathering shadows. But with every effort to secure our sanctuary, I felt the dark tide threatening to encircle us, each echo amplifying the ominous undertone we dared not vocalize. Henry rose, gathering the fragile pieces of the black mirror with deliberate movements. "We need to seal these away before it draws anything else to its depth." He carefully folded the shards in a cloth, the motion fluid and almost reverent. In that instant, his expression shifted, a hint of realization passing across his features, as though he glimpsed something hidden just out of reach. "Hold on, but my words were swallowed by the surge of unsettling sounds as slamming doors echoed throughout the manor, a cacophony of malevolent whispers breaching our sanctuary. Instinctively, we tightened our grip on the door, a futile effort against an encroaching darkness that seemed to pulsate beyond the wooden barrier, a reminder of the fears lurking just out of sight. Each shudder that passed through the ancient structure sent shivers through my body, a tightening grip of anxiety settling in my core. "We're not alone," Thomas said softly, a gentle reminder to ground us as his hazel eyes searched the shadows for reassurance, even as fear gripped his heart. My mind reeled with his words, the thought echoing a chorus of fear in my ears, for I knew that this moment, this standoff against the unknown, would become the threshold of our destinies. We would fight, together or apart, against the entities that whispered from the abyss. Lillian's gaze met mine, her expression a mixture of determination and hope, sparking a flame within my own heart. "Whatever comes, we face it together." As if answering her vow, the door trembled beneath our hands, every vibration underscoring the fragility of our resistance. The dark forces gathering just beyond felt palpably real, shadows swirling, threatening to encroach upon the world we fought to protect. With our combined strength, we fortified our resolve against an unseen tide, a collective pulse echoing within the walls, entwining us with the fate of Pembroke Manor. Each echo reminded me that darkness is rarely devoid of its own magic, a shuddering balance we had yet to understand, but a reality that now pressed against us with an insatiable hunger. The tempest of dread awaited just beyond our sight, eager to consume whatever flickers of light we dared to wield, and in our unity lay a fragile hope, an ember against the darkness. Chapter 12: Confrontation in the Shadows. In the dim corridor of Pembroke Manor, an unsettling tension coiled in the air, thick as the shadow that pooled beneath the shattered mirror on the wall. I stood there, paralyzed, as tendrils of darkness snaked out like the fingers of a malevolent ghost, creeping toward Thomas and Lillian, who were caught in the web of despair I had inadvertently woven. The flickering light of the distant gas lamps barely penetrated the gloom, leaving us cloaked in uncertainty, and the cold whispers of the night began to echo within my mind, reminding me of fears I had long suppressed. Thomas, always so steadfast, staggered backward, his wide hazel eyes reflecting a terror that was new to him. The touch of the tendril encircling his arm froze him in place, a young man rendered powerless against the encroaching shadow. Lillian gasped, a breathless sound that shattered the oppressive silence, as another tendril coiled over her shoulder, a serpent intent on choking the light from her. It was as if the very fabric of the manor had conspired against us, each creak of the floorboards a reminder of our precarious existence. I felt my heart pound within the confines of my chest, my breath hitching as I struggled to process the twisting shape I had become. My features wavered, familiar yet grotesque, as if the dark entity drawing me toward its grasp delighted in the confusion it sowed within me. "Help me!" Thomas cried, a plea wrapped in desperation, and in that moment I realized I could not merely stand by. I had to fight. I concentrated on my hands, clenching and unclenching, as though that simple act could stave off the impending doom, but the entity's pull was an insistent weight that sought to drag me deeper into its abyss. "Ella." Lillian's voice cut through the growing hum emitted from the mirror, her outstretched hand trembling as if reaching for a lifeline. I wanted to respond, to anchor her amidst this storm of shadows and fear, but the world around us swirled like a tempest, drowning out reason. The low, echoing hum pulsed, a grotesque heartbeat synchronized with the slithering movements of the dark tendrils. I focused on Lillian's eyes, her expression filled with both terror and trust, and I felt the warmth of her presence tether me momentarily, breaking through the haze that threatened to suffocate us all. The tendril around Thomas tightened, drawing forth a cry from his lips as he struggled against its grasp, the struggle only fueling the shadow's hunger. With every ounce of my strength, I attempted to reclaim my voice, to defy the entity's reach. "Lillian, hold on." I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper but laced with an urgency that echoed within the stillness. The flicker of hope within her gaze pushed me forward, even as I felt the warmth of my humanity slowly ebbing beneath the pressure of darkness that sought to engulf me whole. As Thomas fought against the pull, I was aware of our three hearts beating in synchrony against the gathering shadows, an unspoken bond formed amid the chaos. The air thickened, saturated with the scent of dust and something else, something sinister. My mind raced, racing against the inexorable hunger of the entity as it pulled tighter, weaving its way around our vulnerabilities, whispering temptations of despair. Suddenly, with a violent shudder, the mirror trembled, reverberating with an unseen energy that stirred the very essence of fear deep within me. I knew then that I stood not merely as a bystander, but as the key in this grotesque puzzle, and my choices in the face of this unfathomable horror would dictate not only our fates, but perhaps the very foundation of our souls. As we fought against the dark, it became painfully clear that we were now intertwined within its merciless grip, destined to face whatever twisted trial awaited us. The heavy door of the narrow study swung open with a creak, revealing Dr. Walter Ambrose, whose presence cut through the chaos like a beacon. He burst inside, his arms laden with ancient leather-bound texts and the flickering glow of an oil lamp, as though he were the only thing standing between us and the abyss that threatened to swallow us whole. The light cast his distinguished features in stark relief, highlighting the urgency in his expression as he took in the scene with a fierce intelligence. I stumbled in behind him, blood trickling down my temple, a stark reminder of the encounter with the malevolent entity. I was still trapped in a nebulous state, a grotesque distortion threatening to devour my very essence, and the world felt as though it spun around me. Dr. Ambrose's gaze fell on me, piercing through the veil of panic I struggled to maintain. "Follow these steps carefully," he commanded, his voice firm and resolute as he spread the texts across the heavy oak table with methodical precision. The pungent scent of old parchment filled the air, mingling with the sharp tang of my own fear. He began demonstrating the careful hand movements over cryptic symbols printed on brittle parchment, each motion embodying centuries of knowledge cloaked in enigma. Beside me, Thomas and Lillian hovered near the doorway, their eyes wide with a mix of concern and confusion as they took in the ritual laid out before us. The flickering flame of the lamp threw dancing shadows across the room, casting eerie shapes that seemed to writhe along the walls, echoing the tumultuous scene outside where shadows still lingered. As Dr. Ambrose traced the symbols, I felt the weight of my transformation pressing against me, fighting for dominance. My hands trembled slightly as I attempted to mirror his movements, a flicker of desperation threading through me. The words of the ritual began to resonate within the chamber, each syllable like a chorus, summoning the shadows lurking in the corners. "Stay focused, Ella," he urged, his brow furrowed as he met my gaze. "This is our only chance. The symbols align with the energy from the mirror. You must channel that to sever its hold." The way his brow creased with concern for my wavering state filled me with both resolve and dread. His voice was steady and commanding, igniting a flicker of hope within me. As the sounds of hurried footsteps outside crept closer, Thomas stepped into the room with a determined look. "I can help. Just tell me what to do," he implored, his kind hazel eyes reflecting unwavering support, but I felt the pulse of terror thrumming beneath his steady facade. Lillian stood frozen, her eyes darting between the symbols and me. "Will it work?" she whispered, the tremor in her voice underscoring the fragility of our situation. I could sense her internal struggle mirrored mine, fear of the unknown, a failure looming larger than the darkness that had crept upon us. "Failure is not an option," Dr. Ambrose intoned, his voice like steel beneath the weight of chaos. "We must unite our intentions, or else." He left the thought hanging in the air, a palpable dread reverberating in the silence that followed. Each of us understood the stakes. The balance of light and darkness hinged upon this moment, a fragile thread suspended over an abyss of our own making. As I took a deep breath, gathering my focus, I recalled the ritual's steps, translating Dr. Ambrose's precise movements into my own as the energy within me surged. The scar on my temple pulsed, the ache resonating with the words reverberating through the room. I could feel the entity's presence, lurking just beyond the threshold, eager for a moment of weakness. Each rustle of parchment and flicker of the lamp only heightened the sense of urgency surrounding the act we were about to perform. My pulse quickened, and I positioned my hands over the intricate symbols, drawing upon every ounce of will within me. Lillian's anxious gaze bore down upon me, but there was a fierce flame in her eyes that inspired me to reclaim the power stolen from us. The oppressive weight of the shadows outside threatened to invade the sanctuary we had carved from the chaos, yet the knowledge shared by Dr. Ambrose anchored me amid the tempest. As the echo of the doorway creaked with more urgency, the room became alive with energy, crackling against the fragile fabric of reality we sought to manipulate. The impending dread hung thickly in the air, but together, with voices intermingling as one, we would weave the threads of defiance against the dark. The narrow hall outside the study was suffused with an unease, and as I leaned against the threshold, I could feel the heaviness in the air that whispered of something beyond comprehension. It was in that charged atmosphere that Henry Blackwood rounded the corner, halting abruptly, his striking green eyes locking onto the chaos within the study like an unyielding anchor to a ship lost at sea. The flickering light from the oil lamp danced across his elegant features, throwing long shadows that mirrored the torment creeping around us. He stood there, momentarily frozen, absorbing the sight of me, barely recognizable in my fractured state, caught between light and shadow, the ritual in full swing with Dr. Ambrose guiding our trembling hands through the arcane motions. I sensed the tumultuous emotions swelling within him, concern, hesitation, and something deeper that shimmered just beneath the surface like the edge of a blade, poised to cut. Inside the study, Dr. Ambrose was a whirlwind of determination, his voice piercing the tension with commands, while Thomas and Lillian stood just beyond my reach, caught between fear and fervent hope. The scene before us was one of controlled chaos, the scattered texts illuminated by the trembling flame, the haunting shadows on the walls a constant reminder of our imminent danger. The entity hovered just outside the thin veil of light we attempted to uphold, eager to consume the light we fought so hard to preserve. I could feel Henry's heart racing, a steady drumbeat that echoed within the disarray of emotions flowing between us. With each breath he took, I perceived the depth of his thoughts. Did he sense the fragility of our moment? Was he aware that stepping into that storm of shadows would shift everything? There was a bond connecting us, one forged through glances and unspoken promises, yet now it lay beneath layers of horror waiting to be ignited. The air crackled with a fierce energy, the shadows swirling in response to the rituals taking shape within the chamber. I could see Henry's hesitance transform into an instinctive battle, a struggle between the man who valued control and the one drawn to chaos like a moth to the flame. He stood, caught between the world outside and the urgency pressing forth within, a storm of emotions swirling within his thoughtful green eyes. "Ella, what are you doing?" he muttered, his voice barely more than a breath, laced with disbelief and desperation. The sound of my name hung in the air, a thread binding our disparate fates, urging him to step further inside. "Please, Henry," I called out, each word feeling like an anchor as the shadows coiled tighter around us, a dark reminder that time was of the essence. My plea hung in the air, echoing through the storm that surrounded us, a prayer for solidarity in the face of encroaching darkness. Dr. Ambrose's commanding presence swept over the room, his focus unwavering as he gestured sharply at me, his eyes alight with urgency. "We have no time. This is not a moment for hesitation," he insisted, his tone cutting through the tension like a knife. I watched as Henry's resolve hardened beneath the weight of Ambrose's words, and something in his posture shifted, a readiness igniting within him. In that moment, the cacophony of fear merged with determination. With a deep breath, Henry stepped forward, his elegant form entering the fray as he crossed the threshold into our battle against the dark. I could see the decision etched into his features, the resolve solidifying behind the uncertainty. "Tell me how to help," he declared, his voice gaining strength as he joined us in the eye of the storm. The shadows swelled, but together we would wield light against the creeping darkness, bound by the weight of our shared desperation and the flickering promise of hope. As the ritual surged forth with a newfound vigor, our hearts beat as one, and we pressed forward, challenging the very essence of fear itself, emboldened by our resolve and the strength that came from unity. The sounds of urgency filled the air, accompanied by the thrum of our collective courage that sought to defy the shadows lurking just beyond our fragile light. Chapter 13. The Mirror's Shattering. The attic felt alive with whispers, secrets hidden in the shadows. Dust motes danced in the dim light, clinging to ancient relics that bore witness to forgotten sorrows. As I stood before the antique black mirror, its surface glimmering like the eyes of a slumbering beast, a chill crept through the cramped space, echoing the heartbeats of my companions, who formed a semicircle behind me, their faces painted with the hues of apprehension and dread. The air was thick, almost suffocating, with the scent of aged wood and the hint of something unnameable lurking just beyond the edges of perception. The floorboards creaked under the weight of our collective fear, a sound that reverberated like a funeral dirge foretelling our fates. Thomas, standing close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his presence, shifted his weight uncertainly, his eyes flickering between me and the shimmering surface of the mirror. His soft expression spoke volumes, his concern wrapped around my heart like a vice. Lillian stood to my left, her fists tightly clenched at her sides, her face a portrait of determination mingled with trepidation. The copper-red curls that framed her heart-shaped face seemed to absorb the muted light, their vibrancy dulled by the shadows creeping from the corners of the attic. I longed to reach out and comfort her, but I knew this moment required my full attention. We were all caught in the web of the unknown, woven tighter by our mutual curiosity and dread. Henry Blackwood occupied the space just behind me, his tall figure draped in a well-tailored suit that felt almost at odds with the oppressive atmosphere. There was a restlessness in his posture, a tension that hinted at the intellectual curiosity that often set him apart from his peers. As I cast a glance over my shoulder, I caught the spark of intrigue in his striking green eyes, but I could also see the flicker of apprehension. He understood the implications of what lay before us. This was no mere reflection, but a doorway to darkness. And then there was Dr. Ambrose, the scholar whose reputation clung to him like a second skin. His wire-rimmed glasses glinted in the candlelight, casting reflections that danced like spirits in the air. The brittle parchment he held, detailing the ritual we had sought, trembled slightly in his hands, as if resonating with an unspoken warning. His measured presence provided some semblance of stability amidst the chaos, but even he could not conceal the gravity of this moment. The mirror shivered, a ripple tracing its depths, and I felt an insistent pull as shadows unfurled from its surface. I caught my breath as the wish-granter emerged, each slow, deliberate step shrouded in an unsettling grace. It was a fluid entity, its form shifting like smoke, coiling and stretching in the dim light of the attic. The way it absorbed illumination felt wrong, as though it sought to claim the very essence of our world within its dark embrace. "Renounce your wishes and accept your fate," the wish-granter intoned, its voice resonating through the air, chilling in its calm authority. The sound reverberated in my chest, a chilling melody that draped over us like a cloak of ice. In that moment, the cold wind swept through the attic, stirring loose papers and cobwebs, raising the fine hairs on my arms. My heart raced, thrumming like a captive bird as I remained rooted in place, torn between desire and dread. I could feel Thomas tense beside me, his fingers clenching and unclenching at his sides, as if battling an unseen force. Lillian's breathing had quickened. I could sense the tension coiling in her limbs, ready to spring into action at any moment. As Henry stepped closer, his curiosity clawing at the edges of the dread that bound us, I felt an overwhelming sense of gravity pull me toward the mirror. The uncertainty of our plight engulfed me as I reached for its dark surface, my gloved fingers trembling visibly in the dim light. The glossy blackness seemed to whisper secrets just beyond my grasp, secrets I longed to hear even as fear knotted my stomach. As I hovered inches from the mirror, I felt a deep unease wash over me, the weight of unfulfilled dreams and a longing for escape mingling with the stark reality of my existence. My thoughts drifted back to the words of my mother, her soft voice echoing in my mind, a warning, a comfort, a plea for wisdom. And yet, the allure of the dark magic whispered in my ears, seducing me with promises of power and change. Around me, the air crackled with anticipation, my companions unaware of the storm brewing within my soul. They watched me closely, their expressions ranging from hope to despair, each one carrying the burden of their own desires. As I stood poised on the precipice of choice, I knew the moment was fragile, a shard of glass teetering on the edge of a dark abyss. I could feel the shadow of the wish-granter drawing closer, wrapping its tendrils around my resolve, testing my courage. And so, with my heart pounding against the confines of my ribcage, I steeled myself against the creeping dread that threatened to swallow me whole. I could no longer linger in uncertainty. The time for decision had arrived. The air hung thick with the weight of temptation, a palpable force that threatened to envelop us entirely. The wish-granter, its fluid form shimmering before us, extended a hand as if inviting me to step into the abyss of my desires. I felt the world shift around me, the very essence of fate trembling at the edge of its precarious balance, and in that moment, I teetered on the precipice of an unfathomable choice. "Power," the wish-granter crooned, each word curling around my heart with seductive warmth. "In exchange for your companion's souls, all your dreams can be yours. Freedom from your shackles, a life beyond these walls." The promise dripped from its tongue, thick and sweet, laced with an undercurrent of malevolence. My companions, with their anxious breaths and wide eyes, shifted, as if sensing the weight of the dark bargain being laid before me. I could almost hear their hearts hammering, pulsing in fear of the unknown that lurked just beyond the edges of the flickering candlelight. Yet beneath that palpable fear lay something else, an awakening flicker of my own ambition, wrestling against the sinister proposition. I felt the pull of my aspirations, the desperate wish for something greater than the narrow confines of my existence. But then, images of Thomas's kind smile, Lillian's quiet strength, and Henry's watchful gaze flared in my mind. Sacrificing them would mean burying my soul beneath layers of darkness. Panic washed over me like a cold wave, freezing my limbs and tightening the grip of dread around my throat. How could I even consider such a horrendous trade? I saw their faces flash before me, the vulnerability etched into each countenance, and I longed to reach out, to reassure them that I would never allow that darkness to claim us. Yet the wish-granter's presence felt like a noose tightening around my desires, squeezing the breath from my lungs and trapping my heart in turmoil. As I wrestled with the tumult of thoughts battling within me, I could feel the atmosphere of the attic shift, a cacophony of crackling energy vibrating through the air. Time seemed to stretch unbearably as a shudder rippled through the room, raising the fine hairs on my arms. The sensation became a raging tempest within me, a swell of horror and defiance churning against the boundaries of my own spirit. I could not falter. I could not sacrifice what I held dear for the ephemeral allure of power. With a resolve that shocked even me, the decision crystallized into an unshakable truth. I could not allow this entity to consume my soul nor the souls of those I cared for. They deserved life, freedom, not the empty promise of desires stained with darkness. My heart raced, pounding in rhythm with the pulse of defiance. Without warning, I surged forward, propelled by a furious wave of determination that drowned out the voice of the wish-granter. My bare fist swung forward with an instinctive ferocity, aimed not just at the surface of the mirror, but at the very heart of the darkness that threatened to engulf us. The moment my knuckles connected with the glass, a violent explosion erupted, echoing in a resounding crash that reverberated like a harbinger of doom throughout the attic. Shards of the black mirror exploded in all directions, scattering like deadly petals caught in the wind. Each fragment glimmered with malevolent energy, as if seeking to ensnare anything within reach. The surge of dark, crackling energy burst forth, bathing the room in ghostly, flickering light that revealed the horror of our surroundings in stark relief. Henry staggered back with a startled cry, his elegant demeanor shattered alongside the remnants of the mirror. I caught a glimpse of his shocked expression, wide-eyed with disbelief, as he sought refuge in the safety of the shadows. Thomas instinctively grabbed Lillian's arm, concern etched across his features as he pulled her close, protectively shielding her from the chaos erupting around us. Dr. Ambrose, clutching the brittle parchment, staggered backward, the scroll slipping through his fingers like fragile dreams lost to time. In the aftermath of that explosive collision, the attic fell silent for a fleeting moment, a quiet void that reverberated with the aftermath of our actions. The air hummed with energy, alive with the resonance of shattered glass and lingering darkness. As I stood amidst the chaos, surrounded by the broken shards glinting on the worn wooden floor, my breath hitched. We were suspended in time, our fates irrevocably altered. Frozen in shock, we faced the consequences of my choice, our expressions haunted by the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The echoes of the wish-granter's voice clung to the air, promising the temptation of power but offering nothing of substance. I realized, in that moment, that we had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. And as the flickering light illuminated the remnants of our past, I understood that true power came not from forsaking one another, but from the bonds we forged in the face of darkness. Chapter 14, Echoes of Choice. As I scrubbed the scuffed tiles of Pembroke Manor, my mop whispered against the stone floor, a futile effort to erase the marks left by lives untold. The narrow hallway, shadowy and oppressive, felt like a wound beneath the weight of candlelight's murky glow. Each stroke sent dust motes swirling in a ghostly ballet, a reminder of my own presence, a mere specter haunting these hallowed halls. I couldn't help but think how every polished surface mirrored the sharp edges of a life spent in servitude, bound by an unyielding duty that threatened to swallow me whole. The echo of footfalls broke the silence, steady and relentless, like the churning of dark waters below a bridge. I glanced up, my heart quickening at the sight of him. The master, Arthur Pembroke, a spectre clad in tailored black, marching through my realm with an authority as frigid as the winter wind. He passed without a word, a mere flick of his cold gray eyes casting over me like an incantation that demanded obedience. "Keep moving," he spat, a clipped command that cut through the stillness, sharp and definitive. Resentment coiled within me like a serpent, for I had no choice but to comply, as I always did. As I forced my gaze back to the tarnished tiles beneath my palms, the scrape of my mop began to sound less like a simple task and more like the death knell of my dreams. How easy it was for him to cast me aside, another discarded thought, in his relentless pursuit of order. But lurking in the periphery of my vision, Lady Beatrice resided, her presence a weight upon my shoulders. I could feel her gloved hand tighten around the ornate lace fan she wielded like a blade, her head tilting slightly as she observed me from the shadows of a heavy drapery. In that moment, I was keenly aware of the vast gulf that separated us, a chasm of privilege and disdain where her eyes scrutinized not just my movements, but the very essence of my spirit. "Look how the maid toils," she seemed to whisper through her silence, her posture unyielding, tall and sharp as the edges of the finely crafted furnishings that adorned our home. A moment stretched between us, taut and full of unsaid words, yet her frosty demeanor shattered any sense of camaraderie we might have shared, like a mirror tossed upon the ground. As the soft sound of nails scratching against the silver tray echoed in the stillness, I set it down upon a nearby table with an almost defiant flourish. Here I was, an unwelcome ghost within these walls, scrubbing at a reality that held no promise for me. The manor loomed around me like a cold-hearted beast, and with every stroke of my mop, I could feel the weight of expectations pushing me down, ever down, into a void from which escape seemed impossible. Yet, even amidst the murky depths of servitude, my dreams flickered like the candles burning dimly above, a soft, stubborn light clinging to existence. As I pressed the mop against the floor one last time, I sought to wipe away not just the grime, but also the fragments of a world that insisted on stifling my soul. The servants' quarters nestled adjacent to the kitchen offered a peculiar sort of comfort, despite the chaos that encroached from every side. The scent of fresh linens mingled with the savory aromas wafting through the doorway, and within these humble walls, a small semblance of solace thrived among the debris of a life tethered by duty. As I entered, I found Thomas hunched over a wooden shelf, carefully stacking chipped porcelain dishes, each piece a relic of some previous grand affair, now reduced to mere echoes of forgotten gaiety. His movements were precise and deliberate, as though he believed every small act of kindness toward the fragile plates might somehow restore their lost elegance. I admired that about him, the gentle way he approached his work, transforming the mundane into a shared responsibility among those of us trapped beneath the burden of servitude. "Watch out there," Lillian cautioned, her voice brightening the atmosphere as she adjusted a crooked picture frame that hung on the wall, its image of a field bathed in golden sunlight seeming far removed from our reality. "If you break any more, I'll need to stitch your fingers back together with needle and thread." I smiled at her jest, appreciating how her laughter lit up the gloom in our small sanctuary. Lillian possessed an innate grace, her copper-red curls bouncing as she moved, a small ember of light against the slate of our existence. Her cheerful demeanor belied the toil in her hands, stitching and sewing that would never earn her the accolades she deserved. Thomas's warm hazel eyes met mine for a fleeting moment, and as he placed another dish gently upon the shelf, he murmured, "We must mend what is broken." His words draped across us like a thin veil, hinting at something deeper than mere porcelain. In that shared space, the three of us felt an unspoken connection, those of us who toiled in the shadow of grandeur, aware of the fragility of our spirits and the delicate nature of hope. I recalled the mirrored shard I had seen earlier, and its promise of fragmented reflections. Hadn't we all felt like shattered pieces at one point or another? Lillian turned to me, adjusting her well-made dress, a faded earth tone that suited her perfectly. "Isn't it rather remarkable how we seek to patch up the frayed edges of our lives?" she mused, glancing out at the small fogged window. "Look at that light, it's almost strange, isn't it?" I followed her gaze, squinting against the squalor of the quarters. A thin ribbon of light fell through the fogged glass, illuminating dust particles that danced with the whisper of air. It glimmered against the worn surfaces, creating fleeting images of something that might have been, something beautiful yet out of reach. "It is strange," I echoed, but I found myself pulled deeper into thoughts that reached beyond the broken and the mundane. Here, among companions, I saw the shadows that we carried, stitched together by dreams that bound us tighter than the walls of the manor ever could. Each of us, in our way, held the potential to shine through the fog and darkness that surrounded our lives. "Still," Thomas continued, placing his hand softly on my shoulder, "we do our best with what we have." His touch was gentle, like a balm that sought to ease the quiet ache within me, and I felt a surge of gratitude for this connection, this small ember of resilience against the cold exterior of the Pembroke world. Lillian busied herself with the wobbly table, her fingers deftly steadying its surface as the sound of clattering crockery and soft footsteps on creaking floorboards surrounded us. In these moments, as our voices melded and the laughter rose, I felt the distance from the ominous shadows of the manor shrink. For a heartbeat, the boundaries of servitude seemed to dissolve, and in their place was the fragile promise of kinship, fleeting yet profound. Yet beneath the surface, I remained haunted by the very thing we sought to mend. The unyielding grip of duty tightened around me, reminding me of the toll it demanded, reminding me of what lay ahead. In the dimly lit corner of the manor, nestled behind a cluttered bookcase, the air trembled with the weight of forgotten knowledge. Dust particles hung like shimmering constellations in the soft glow of the fading light, and the scent of old paper seemed to whisper secrets of a world beyond my own. I lingered in this alcove, drawn to the library's chaotic charm, where stories lay hidden among stacks of leather-bound volumes and scattered papers, just as I felt I had been hidden away, smothered under the weight of the Pembroke name. Henry stood against the backdrop of this disordered sanctuary, tall and elegantly dressed. He was the epitome of a gentleman, yet there lingered an edge to him, a restlessness that intrigued me. The way he held his posture, as though he had been molded from the very fabric of the texts that surrounded us, lent him an air of sophistication that was both alluring and intimidating. As our eyes met, the world around us faded. He extended a hand towards me, his fingers poised, as though inviting me into the depths of a world where we could speak of more than just menial duties. "My library is open to you tonight," he said, his voice a smooth cadence that coaxed the words from the shadows, each syllable layered with a warmth that seemed to break through the coldness of the manor. I hesitated at the threshold, my fingers grazing the spines of ancient books as I stepped forward, the floorboards creaking under the shift of my weight. Each title seemed to promise a release from the binds of my servitude, and yet fear constricted around my heart, a vice that kept me from truly stepping beyond the realms I had known. What awaited me in a world mingling with literature and lofty aspirations, far removed from scuffed tiles and curt commands? A small shard of a shattered mirror lay upon the table, catching both our eyes as we approached. It glinted in the dim light, a fragment of a reflection, possibly a vision of what could be, and a tangible reminder of what had been. "You must excuse the disarray," he said lightly, his voice smooth but laden with an underlying gravity that resonated in the air. "It seems this room has borne witness to my chaotic thoughts and unspoken yearnings." "Chaos seems a fitting companion to us all," I offered, unable to suppress the bittersweet smile tugging at my lips. "Our lives can become unraveled in the smallest of moments, can they not?" "Yes," he replied, stepping closer, the distance between us narrowing until it thrummed with tension. "Yet in chaos, there exists the potential for beauty, for creation, for new stories to emerge." As he spoke, I was filled with a longing that reached far beyond my physical boundaries, a desire to unfurl like the pages of a beloved book, to let my ink spill freely upon the parchment. In the fragile light of this hidden corner, I could feel my fears wavering. The unfathomable weight of my existence in service felt momentarily light, lifting like a veil in a breeze. We began to speak of literature, of passions and dreams, his words flowing with articulate precision that captivated me, unraveling my defenses one thread at a time. He spoke of the intoxicating realms found within the pages of tomes, while my fingers brushed against the leather covers, each touch awakening the dormant soul within me that had so long been shackled. The shards of glass glinted once more, drawing my gaze as if it possessed a consciousness of its own, reminding me of the brokenness we all carried. "Perhaps," I whispered, tracing the glimmering edge of the mirror with trembling fingertips, "the reflection is not just of what is, but what we could choose to be." He leaned closer, his gaze sharp yet soft, a beautiful amalgamation that played upon my senses. "Indeed," he murmured, "reflections can show us that we are made of fragments, of dreams, desires, and unyielding aspirations. If only we dare to gather those shards and piece them together." In that moment, everything shifted. The very air trembled around us, as the walls whispered secrets I had long sought to escape. Every word became a lifeline, each revelation shimmering with promise. He moved slightly closer, our breaths mingling in the delicate space that remained, and I felt as though the world had slipped away, leaving only the two of us suspended in the darkness. What would come of this meeting? The hesitation lingered on the edges of my thoughts, shadowed by the encroaching reality that bound me. But for now, I allowed the flickers of hope to dance amid the darkness, daring to envision a tapestry of possibilities weaving its way into my weary heart. The haunting cadences of our conversation wound through the air, tying our destinies together in intricate patterns, so fragile yet so profound, illuminating the shadows of a future I dared to dream might one day exist beyond the confines of Pembroke Manor. Chapter 15: The Unwritten Page. The dim study breathed an ancient air, filled with the weight of books that whispered secrets long forgotten. Dr. Ambrose and I leaned over the heavy oak table, where the candlelight trembled like a heart caught in fear. The brittle pages of a grimoire lay before us, enticing and treacherous, as we braced ourselves for the darkness that sought to unearth itself within the words of the past. I held my breath, acutely aware of the musty scent of parchment mingling with the faint traces of soot from the candle. My fingers, steady but tinged with the thrill of dread, trembled as they danced over the spine of the ancient book. The leather was cracked and weathered, as if time had left its cruel mark upon it. But I found beauty in its age, a beauty that mirrored the fervor lurking within my soul, longing for a greater understanding beyond the bounds of my modest existence. "Pass me the ink and quill," Dr. Ambrose instructed in his measured tone, pulling my attention from the spectral illustrations swirling within the margins. I nodded, swallowing back a wave of anticipation, and reached toward a carved wooden box on a nearby shelf, my fingers brushing against cool metal. I had glimpsed the amulet resting beside the texts moments before, a relic of forgotten power, nestled among the familiar weight of books I adored. With the quill and ink in hand, I returned to his side, feeling the pull of the symbols drawn with a practiced hand upon the aged parchment. Dr. Ambrose pointed to a diagram with his brass pointer, and I could sense the pulse of dread tightening within my chest. There was something in those lines, a hidden secret I could not fathom, yet it whispered sweetly to my restless heart. "Here," he murmured, marking a section with deliberation. "The incantation suggests a deep connection between the written word and its power. Do you see how the symbols interact?" His voice took on a hushed quality, a caution that wrapped itself around my senses. I leaned in closer, a flicker of candlelight casting grotesque shadows across the page, warping the shapes into strange caricatures of fears I had long buried. The beauty of the text began to twist, the letters writhing beneath my gaze as I grappled with the notion of speaking such words aloud. "Yes," I whispered, although doubt coiled around my tongue, stifling the resolve I had clutched so tightly. As we worked in synchronized silence, the clock in the corner ticked methodically, its hands moving toward an unknown fate. Each page we turned became a ritual, a gradual unfurling of secrets layered in dust and ink, while we stood on the precipice of knowledge that could either elevate or consume us. I watched Dr. Ambrose mark another passage, a practiced gesture that flowed with an elegance I could only dream of emulating. For a moment, my thoughts wandered to the world beyond this dim chamber, to the lives we led outside these walls. Yet each time I returned to the diagrams and symbols before me, the gravity of our task yanked me back into this fragile cocoon of knowledge, tightly woven with threads of fear and obsession. Was this what my mother had feared? The lure of dark things, promising to reveal what was shrouded in shadow. The amulet called to me, its surface cool against my fingertips as I touched it lightly, stealing a glance at Dr. Ambrose, who remained oblivious to my distraction. In the depth of my heart, I felt a hunger, a yearning for power, for understanding that outweighed the cost of my soul. What was left to lose? "Ella," Dr. Ambrose's voice broke through my reverie. "I need you to focus. The symbols on this parchment, they could unlock more than just knowledge. Are you prepared for that?" "Prepared." I swallowed hard, gazing into his intent green eyes that seemed to pierce through the veil of pretense. I nodded, although the answer felt uncertain, adrift in the ethereal glow of the candles. The shadows encroached around us, lurking as silent witnesses, and with each tick of the clock, a haunting melody began to play, a rhythm to the dance of our dangerous exploration. And there we remained, intertwined with the unfolding pages, standing between the realms of dark magic and the fragile light of our conscience, destined to unearth what had long been buried in the recesses of forbidden tomes. Little did we know the grasping tendrils of knowledge were already reaching into our hearts, eager to claim what we would willingly offer, our very selves. The manor's corridors loomed around me like the veins of a slumbering beast, their dimness steeped in an eternal twilight that whispered secrets only the walls could tell. Each step I took echoed in the stillness, a rhythmic reminder of my place within this vast, confining space where the weight of both duty and unspoken dreams bore down upon my shoulders. With each porcelain cup cradled on my tray, I felt the coolness of the silver spoons, the smooth surfaces a reminder of elegance that seemed so far from my own existence. I moved with crisp, deliberate steps, carefully navigating the shadows that clung to the corners of the dimly lit halls. The air was thick with an unnameable tension, as if the manor itself held its breath, anticipating the return of an echo that would never come. Upon entering the servants' hall, I spotted Thomas, standing by the long wooden table, diligently wiping down its surface with a clean cloth. His kind hazel eyes met mine, a fleeting connection shared between us amidst the relentless cycle of chores. A sense of solace radiated from him, a gentle presence in a world that often felt overwhelmingly dark. "Evening, Ella," he said softly, his voice rich with warmth, a balm to the cold atmosphere surrounding us. "Good evening, Thomas," I replied, allowing a brief smile to cross my lips, feeling a hint of camaraderie in our shared labors. His presence offered a semblance of hope amidst the daunting silence of the manor. We exchanged a brief nod, a shared acknowledgement of the small victories woven through our monotonous tasks, moments that tethered us to our humanity. "Will you be tending to the library later?" he inquired, glancing toward the shadows that lingered near the threshold. "Yes, Dr. Ambrose has called for me again," I murmured, my thoughts drifting back to the weight of that grimoire, the insatiable desire gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. It seems the dark truths refuse to release their grasp. The corners of his mouth turned upward with understanding, a gesture that hinted at the burdens we both carried in this world of privilege and servitude. "Be careful, Ella. The knowledge one seeks may not always be a blessing." His words held a gravity, rooted in his quiet wisdom, and I found myself momentarily caught in their depths. Before I could respond, a figure loomed at the doorway of the dining room, his tailored vest catching the flicker of candlelight like a beacon. It was Henry, with his striking green eyes glimmering with mischief and charm. "Good evening, Ella," he spoke, his voice melodic, cutting through the tension with the ease of a practiced gentleman. I paused mid-motion, heart racing as I adjusted the strap of my mailbag, all too aware of the distance between us, a chasm forged by our disparate lives. His polite smile lingered as I passed, a thin veneer of camaraderie barely masking the unspoken curiosity that twined around his words. "Are you off to rescue the unfortunate souls of the library?" For a fleeting moment, I wished I could summon the courage to bridge that gap, to linger in the warmth of his gaze without the heavy shackles of propriety binding me. "It seems Dr. Ambrose requires my assistance," I replied, the habitual servility of my voice clashing against my internal yearning for more. He chuckled lightly, the sound teasing the air with warmth. "Ah, I trust you will discern what treasures lie beneath those ancient tomes. Be sure to safeguard yourself, lest you find more than you bargained for." With that, he offered a courtly bow, a flourish of noble grace that seemed almost mocking in the confines of our world. I felt the stir of disquiet within me, a tempest of unspoken desires and rebellion thrumming against the walls I had built around my heart. Yet, the starkness of the manor wrapped around us like a cloak of despair, whispering its reminders of our roles within its haunting embrace. Outside, the stone walls loomed, resolute and unyielding, narrow windows gazing out upon a world indifferent to the struggles that played out within. As I carried my tray through the corridors, I could feel the weight of the manor watching, a silent witness to our entwined fates, each interaction an echo reverberating against its age-old heart. With each step, my mind danced between thoughts of Thomas's kindness and Henry's piercing gaze, threading through the tapestry of servitude and aspirations in a place that threatened to stifle both. And in that moment, the world beyond those walls seemed both tantalizingly close yet forever out of reach, the darkness closing in as my heart yearned for the impossible, connection, freedom, and the defiance of my past. As I continued my duties, I found myself lost within the confines of this world, a realm filled with echoes of despair, unyielding loyalty, and shadowy dreams. Yet amid it all, a glimmer of rebellion ignited, illuminating the path toward my own awakening in this forgotten tale, a story still waiting to be written. In the confines of my small room, I found solace in the soft glow of a solitary candle, its flicker casting gentle shadows that danced across the walls, a tender reprieve from the oppressive gloom that seeped through the manor like a ghost in the night. My oak desk stood patiently before me, an altar of reflection where ink and parchment met the tumultuous tide of my thoughts. As I sat in the quiet, my quill glided effortlessly across the uneven pages of my leather-bound journal, each word a delicate step into the uncharted territories of my soul. The candle's glow illuminated my inked thoughts, illuminating a world that often felt too dim to bear. In this sanctuary, I surrendered to the flow of my heart, pouring onto the page the secrets I dared not speak aloud, the dreams that shimmered just beyond my grasp. With every curve of the quill, I wrote of my day, the exchanges shared with Thomas, his kindness an anchor in the dark sea of my servitude, and Henry's captivating presence, as elusive as the stars I longed to reach. My heart yearned for the freedom I had glimpsed in their eyes, the connection that bloomed for a heartbeat before it was cruelly plucked from existence, leaving only echoes of desire in its wake. Yet amid my reflections, a nagging discomfort coiled tightly around my thoughts. What awaited beyond the gilded letters, on the pages? The knowledge Dr. Ambrose pursued felt like a bitter poison, intriguing yet treacherous, a temptation promising freedom through sacrifice, yet the cost seemed steep, heavier than I had dared to consider. I paused, tapping the side of my journal with my fingers as uncertainty seeped into my mind. Just then, I turned my gaze toward the small window, an habitual ritual that offered little more than the cold embrace of night. It was then that I saw them, the eyes sharp and unyielding, gleaming from the darkness outside, unnaturally vivid against the dimness that swallowed all else. For an instant, they bore into me, freezing the air around my heart, a gaze that felt too familiar, too invasive. The window pane trembled under a slight draft, stirring the candle flame into a wild dance as the silhouette began to fade into the inkiness of night, leaving behind a trace of reflective darkness, echoing the churn of unease building within me. My breath hitched, caught in the tangled web of fear and curiosity. What could lurk beyond my sanctuary? What desired to breach this fragile barrier I called my life? With trembling hands, I set down my pen, ink pooling on the page where dreams melded with fears. The candle flickered violently, as though sensing my growing trepidation, a reminder of the shadows creeping ever closer, a representation of the doubts that had whispered through my thoughts like dark tendrils winding around my heart. I was caught in a tempest of both longing and trepidation, suspended on the edge of a precipice I had not anticipated. As silence fell heavy around me, the candle extinguished, plunging my chamber into a sudden darkness, mirroring the tumultuous storm raging within. I was enveloped by an unsettling stillness, the quiet a herald of something more ominous that lurked beyond the walls of my existence. And in that suffocating void, I could only wonder, was the darkness my ally, or would it become my greatest foe in this ever-encroaching labyrinth of shadows? The answers felt elusive, tantalizing, and altogether terrifying, leaving me poised precariously between dread and the pulse of an awakening that promised to unfurl the very fabric of my reality.